Right, everybody ready? Everybody good? All right, so I'll declare this 528th meeting of Canterbury Regional Council open, and welcome to the meeting, everyone. First of all, this is a very exciting day because we've created a treasure. The treasure is our long-term plan. It's a treasure around the well-being for the people of Canterbury, looking forward, not doing business as usual, but doing business in a way that's very visionary around our vision that we created, that we took responsibility for as elected members in a new democratic council, and I'm really proud of what we've done. So I think it's congratulations to everybody, and it's a very big council meeting because we're signing it off. So everybody's done a fantastic job. We all bring different perspectives to this long-term plan, and I think it's a great achievement working collaboratively with staff that we've got to produce a document where we have, especially the aspects around nature-based education for people in our community around democracy and a new way of doing our business and facing climate change and ecological destruction. So I think it's fantastic. At the same time, while we've been finishing off this, we're faced with terrible floods in Canterbury. And I want to recognise the people who have been dramatically effective, where water has affected, with water coming into their properties, into their homes, and where they earn their livelihoods. It's been a problem that people have faced ever since people first came to live in these islands at the bottom of the Pacific. And we've had an amazing response from staff and the civil defence people, and amazingly everybody's safe. So now we have to look at how we're going to work around flood protection, both from protecting our assets and our people and our well-being, but also around making sure that we are ready for future climate change risks. We have with us today Julian Tan from Audit New Zealand. Welcome to the meeting, and we'll, as I said, we'll be talking to you more closely when we adopt the long-term plan shortly. There's also another reason to be celebrating at this meeting, and that's because our Tumu Taiao, Yvette Couch-Lewis, has been awarded a New Zealand Honour of Merit. So I'd like to particularly congratulate Yvette for that recognition of her work around the environment, and particularly in relation to the work that she's undertaken at Canterbury Regional Council as a hearing commissioner. And so we're going to ask Yvette to respond in a little minute, but we'll just ask Yayan to do a mihi whakatau, followed by Peter Scott, who will open the meeting with a karakia, and then we'll return to you, Yvette, for a few words. Over to you, Yayan.
Moko puki moko kake puki o ke tō whaki ki te raki tuatahi ka kia ke tō whaki ki te raki tuarua haere ke tō whaki ki te raki tuakahuru. Ka puta kairoka e te hārore, ka puta te takatoka tahi kia re hua e tihei wa mauri ora. Kia rātou mā kua taku i atara whānui o tāne. Moi mai rā, hoki mai. Kauri taku waro kia tuhiwi. Ki te mauka tere, ki te whānau Crofts, i wehe atu, i te taua whakaruru hau i Isla Crofts. I wahine taua kaharawa i whawhai mo te Māori, te ropu Māori toko i te ora. No reira e te whaia. Haere atu rā. Kauri taku, whakaaro ki a koe, Claire, mo te wehe atu i tō whaia hoki. Nui te aroha o mātou katoa kia koe i tēnei wā pauri. Nō reira, tēnā koe, te aroha nui kia koe i tēnei wā me tō whānau. Kia rau haere, moi mai rā, oki mai, tiraha, whakatā. Aptino tātou hono, rātou kia rātou. apiti no tātou hono, tātou kia tātou, no reira, tēnā koutou. I tautoko ngā mihi, ko mihi i te tiamana, ki ngā tangata, i raru mai te waipukutia, i te ratu wiki, mai te ua kaha, ki ngā pāki whakatekateko a Waitaha, kia koutou, kia kaha, kia mai, kia manua nui. Hoki, ki ngā kaimahi, o te kaunihera nei, o te mahi, hei tautoko, ia rātau, he raru ana. Nā reira, kia koe Stephanie me tō kaimahi, nei te mihi kia koutou mo tērā mahi hoki. Kia koe, Julian, nau mai hara mai, wakinui e tātou, mo te whakaai, mo tēnei te paitawhiti, te mahere paitawhiti, mihi atu ki ngā kai kaunihera mo koutou kaha, hei whakarite tērā butinga o tērā mahi, aha ko te piki me te heki, nei te mihi kia koutou, mo tō whakaaitanga mo tēnei mahere. Kaore i roro o te kōrero nei, nā reira huri noa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tā katoa, ka huri au te rākau, ki te kai kaunihera a Kapiti Scott, mo te kōrero i tēnei wā, nā reira, tēnā koe.
Tihe moriora, tēnā koe Tumu Taiao Karamu. Tēnā koutou nai konihera, e kai whakahare, nena kai mahi. Welcome. I'm going to do Tia Kina a Waitaha. I think it's appropriate. Mana hauti ora o ti rangi o ti papa e. Mana hauti ora o nai, ona wai, ona hau e. Tuia ti onamata, tuia ti anamata. Hi o ranga mo na iwi, mo na uri, whakaheke e. Tia kina ti tau, tia kina a Waitaha e. Omi e, ui e, taiki e. And if I could, I'll just indulge with that interpretation for you. And it's not literally said, but what it means is open up the vitality of the sky, of the earth, open up the vitality of the waters and the winds, weave together the past and weave together the future, which we're about to do today, to have wellness for the peoples, for those to come, care for the environment, care for Canterbury.
Thank you. So I'd just like to go back now to congratulating more fully Yvette Couch-Lewis for the great honour of being presented with an order of merit, the New Zealand Honours. She won't receive the actual order until December, but we thought we would give Yvette a chance today to actually say a few words formally, since this is the first council meeting we've had since it became public that and the honours were announced. So thank you, Yvette, if you'd like to say a few words. Pop on your speaker.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's a huge honour that I have received, and one that I take quite humbly, because I must say that your first reaction when you see something like this is, why me? There are so many people out there that are far more deserving than me. And spending that time is probably why they give you such a lead in time to accepting, because you have to accept, and you also have to accept what has been written about you as well. So I think that lead in is because you go through those kind of emotions. And in doing that, it reminds you of all the amazing people that you work with, and that has brought you to that day when you're looking at that email acknowledging you, that it actually is not you, it is everybody else. Even right down to my husband, who has been there having to listen to me come home annoyed about something, or I'm rushing off and he has to cook the meals. I probably do about the mahi that I do probably about 75%, 80% of that time is voluntary because of the taonga species that I am totally committed to. I am totally committed to my tribe and to my hapu. My hapu is Te Hapu o Ngāti Wheki, Te Raki Whakaputa, Rapaka. It is also Arahura. And there I learned about the river and the importance of walking the awa and being cleansed. So whenever I felt down, I'd usually take a trip across the Alps to home and be washed by the awa, just to refocus. But thank you very much for the great honour, and thank you to everyone here because you have all contributed to that email that I received. It is not just me, it is you, because we're learning all the time and working towards the taonga that we all have, because our manu, our vertebrates, they need the why. They need the holistic te ao Māori. Focus on that, because my manu is unable to survive, will become extinct if we don't look at that big picture in te ao Māori. And that is why I respect everybody at this table and the staff in Environment Canterbury and you, Stephanie, for your guidance and leadership that you give over this short period of time I've been in here that I have seen. So kia ora and thank you for the honour. Kia ora.
Right, thank you, Yvette. There's no apologies. There's no conflicts of interest. There's no people speaking to us today at either the public forum, the deputations, or presenting us with a petition. Although we did have a gentleman who wanted to speak to us around the flooding, he's unable to come today. We're looking forward to hearing that at a future council meeting. Now we're moving to page 9, and we're looking at the minutes. The minutes of the meetings. Are there any? We've dealt with accuracies, haven't we, Council Secretary?
Yes, Chair. There's a typo on page 50. The amendment regarding the bus was Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie. We'll move with that motion.
So you've got that fixed.
Yep.
Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Sorry, I didn't pick it up before, but I see in the conflicts of interest around the submissions to the LTP that I'm listed as having a conflict with QE2 Trust. I haven't. And given that we actually voted them some funding in the LTP, it's inappropriate to suggest that I do, I think.
Catherine Shaki will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not so much a conflict of interest as I think, did you say that you had
I've got no association with QE2 Trust at all, so. Oh no, that's right.
Anything else anybody wants to raise? All right, we'll call for a mover and second for the minutes of the 27th of April. Moved by Councillor Peter Scott, seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. I'll put it to the vote that we receive and confirm those minutes. All in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Moving to page 38, the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of May. Has anybody got any particular issues around those? We've made some corrections, have we, on those ones, or were they perfect? They were perfect. Okay, excellent. Once again, moved by Councillor Peter Scott, and seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. All those in favour of the 13th of May being received and confirmed, please say aye. Is there anybody against? There being nobody against, that's carried. We're moving on to the 20th of May now on page 44. Are there any matters on page 44 for the minutes of the 20th of May meeting? All right, we're looking for a mover of those minutes, please. Moved by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Lan Fan. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Matters arising, we don't have any matters arising today. That's where we usually talk about any letters or correspondence or things that we've done in relation to past public forums or deputations or petitions. Now, what we're going to do now is turn to the long-term plan, which is on page 116 of the agenda for those people who are following us on the maybe online. If you go to page 116 of the agenda, you'll find the report of the long-term plan. Now, first of all, we have to do some technicalities around the long-term plan. So we'd like to invite Gillian Tan from the Audit New Zealand to come forward to the table, please. Right, would you like to say a few words, Gillian? Thank you.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to your council meeting, councillors. I wish to add my congratulations to the council. It's been a tremendously long period of time over which the consultation document and the long-term plan got finalized. There's a lot of effort put in, and I want to express my thanks to your people for working collaboratively with us. There were many issues behind the scene you're not aware of that we debated and discussed through exchange of emails and face-to-face meetings, and might I say long hours. So today we are in a position to issue our audit report, subject to receiving from council the signed representation letter. So last night we sent to management the draft opinion. In substance, nothing has changed. There's a minor grammatical error which we fixed this morning. The audit report is an unmodified audit report. So in other words, we are completely satisfied with the long-term plan, as meeting its legislative purpose in terms of the Local Government Act and also in terms of the financial prudence regulations. So there's nothing in the audit report that's of concern to anybody here or to your community. Nevertheless, we have included what we call an emphasis of matter paragraph in the audit report, the purpose of which is to draw readers' attention to a matter around the significant flooding event over which the damage and the reinstatement costs and so on, that's not known currently. So that's the emphasis of matter paragraph that we are mentioning about in the audit report. So happy to take questions.
Has anybody got any questions for Gillian? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gillian, for coming in this morning. I have two questions. How have you found engaging with this long-term plan compared to previous? And also, if you could just elaborate on what your main areas of focus or concern were through going through our long-term plan, that would be appreciated. Just press your button again, please.
Sure. The focus for us in the long-term plan, we have advised council at the start of the work. But the main things that we focus on and wanted satisfaction in the course of our work at the consultation document phase and right through to the final LTP phase around affordability. So in other words, you have adopted your financing policy. Does it make sense? In terms of what you propose to do you have the ability to carry them out? So that's the work that we focus on. Although we have no primary responsibility around legislative compliance over rates, we do sanity check, and there's quite a lot of work that we do, including looking at your rates cap and so on. What else do we focus on? We focus on the entire document as a whole. Does it make sense to your ratepayers? Does it make sense to anybody who picks it up and read it? Is there any alignment between your policies, your infrastructure strategy, and your financing strategy? They all got to be integrated in a way that, as a whole, makes sense. And on balance, they provide to your ratepayers, your community, comfort that document that you're signing off on or adopting today is fit for purpose for long-term planning and so on, and accountability back to your ratepayers. Does that help?
Thank you. Anybody else wish to ask a question? Councillor Hands.
Just a quick question. You said that you put the advice through to management last night. Just wondering, is it normal for us not to have received the letter or report prior to us making this decision, or is that just for my knowledge?
Well, ideally, we want to give plenty of notice. We're still picking the bun, so to speak. Yesterday, we signaled to management and a copy to the chair of the audit committee, park committee, about this emphasis on meta paragraph regarding the flooding event. But apart from that, it wasn't really anything exciting. We did look at, because the information was received pretty late and you guys received the information late from Waka Kotahi around the funding. So we need to understand what it all means to ECAN, whether you need to adjust that in your forecasts. Ultimately, we decided that the amount is not significant enough to lose any more sleep on.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the service that you've provided. I think it's been fantastic, and it's really great that you work in sync with us like that, and we've got it all finalised. So that's really good. So now we have a letter here that we're going to deliver to you that I've just signed.
Thank you. So, councillors, if there are no more questions, I'll excuse myself. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back soon on the annual audit.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, doesn't take long to come round, does it? Thank you very much. All right, moving on. Now I'd like to ask David Paranel O'Connell and Catherine to come to the table. Catherine George. Yeah. Over to you, Catherine.
Mihi o te ata. Good morning. The purpose of this item is to present Council with the final draft long-term plan 2021-31 for adoption. And Chair Jenny's already referred us to pages 116 to 125 of your agenda papers. As you know, the long-term plan must be adopted before the 1st of July and before Council can set the rates and the rates resolution is in the following paper to this paper. You will recall that the development of the long-term plan began early in 2020 when you had some workshops to discuss your strategic direction for this organisation. And you've set the strategic direction, and that was adopted in the middle of the year, and that has enabled staff and you to work through with consideration of that strategic direction, both your enduring priorities and your transformational opportunities, what that looks like in terms of a program of work. And that has resulted and provided the basis for the portfolio structure and the 25 programs which form part of this long-term plan. And it aligns with the wellbeing frameworks and the sustainable development goals that you looked at as part of your strategic direction document. The process from here is with my learned colleague, David.
Kia ora, morena kia koutou. Thank you, Catherine. So the draft long-term plan was consulted with Canterbury communities from the 8th of March to the 11th of April, and through that process we received close to 1,300 submissions, raising over 6,500 individual submission points, which were reviewed and analysed by staff, but you also heard, additional to that, from around 150 members of the public through your hearings that were conducted over the 5 days in April and early May. As I said, Council received staff analysis and advice on all submissions, and then considered those submissions and deliberated on changes to the long-term plan on the 20th of May. Subsequent to that, changes have been made to the long-term plan that was consulted on and have been incorporated into this final document. The Council report outlines those changes that have been made as a result of the deliberations, and those points are taken as read. As you've just heard from Audit, they have reviewed the document, and I just want to, for the record, acknowledge Audit New Zealand, who have been under incredible strain due to the impacts of COVID, and want to acknowledge they're working collaboratively with us to meet the timeframes to have the long-term plan delivered for you today. So the recommendations before Council are on page 116 and 117. They're ordered so that Council can first adopt the Revenue and Financing Policy, which is a requirement under the Local Government Act 2002, before you then adopt the long-term plan as a full document. So hand back to you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll just, we might take some questions as we go along. We'll just start moving into the, to get some, oh, well, is there anybody who particularly wants to ask a question about that first? So we'll deal with questions as we go through, I think. So unless anyone's got some specific questions around what David just said. All right, so we'll go on then to the first resolution. I'm looking for a mover for that number 1, that the Council adopts the Revenue and Financing Policy as included in the Environment Canterbury 2021-31 long-term plan. Moved by Councillor Peter Scott. Is that, have we got a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Vicky Southworth. Is there any questions anybody's got around this particular resolution? I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? Yes, there's 2 people opposed. Do you want your, 3. Do you want your votes recorded? That's Councillor Claire Mackay, Councillor Megan Hans. Do you want yours recorded? Councillor Ian McKenzie. Right, we're moving on to resolution 2, that the council receives the independent auditor's report from Audit General for inclusion in the Environment Canterbury's long-term plan 21 to 31 as required by section 94 of the Local Government Act. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Farn. Any discussion about this resolution? All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody being opposed, please say so. There's no one opposed, that's carried. Now, the next two I'll move together. That's number 3 and 4. The first one being notes that rates are not being set at the level sufficient to meet the 2021-22 years projected operating expenses, and so debt funding and use of reserves of some programs are being used to balance the budget. The next one is in relation to in accordance with section 100, small subsection 2 of the Local Government Act. The council notes that the projected operating revenues for 21-22 financial year are not set at the level sufficient to meet the year's projected operating expenses, but resolves that it is financially prudent to set the projected operating revenues at that level, having had regard to the matters set out in section 102A to D of the Local Government Act for the reasons set out in the paper. That's basically around the doability question of whether we can do this that we've planned and have done a lot of work giving us advice around these issues. Moved by Councillor Phil Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Claire Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I'm not going to vote for this, I would just like to put on record that I do not see it as a financially prudent matter, and I will discuss that under the next item in part of my broader description.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Now we're up to resolution 5. Adopts that the council adopts the Environment Canterbury long-term plan 21-31 in the form attached to this agenda, including the fees and charges policy. I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. Are there any questions people would like to ask at this stage? I think this is where we'll take your question that you had. Have you got a question, Councillor Farn?
Thank you, Chair. My questions have largely been answered. I'm actually okay. Thank you.
Those questions are answered. Did anybody else have any questions? Councillor Grant Edge.
Just three questions related, if the staff could just clarify a few things for me. Page 123, item 31. I wonder if staff could just clarify what the minor changes are, and yeah, if you could just briefly comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. The main change to that policy was with regard to the river rating districts. So following the deliberations, it was the update to the tables contained in the policy to accommodate that, plus some minor wording changes just to take on the changes made through the deliberations, but mainly around river rating.
Second question, Chair, was related to page 124, item 36. Reference there to incorporating debt funding for the Freshwater Regulatory Framework Program. Just to clarify that that's specifically for that program. And if you could just explain how the coastal plan and the RPS, which was sort of in the LTP mentioned alongside that, how that funding's being handled.
Thank you. So through the chair, as resolved through the deliberations, council confirmed to borrow $6 million. That money is specifically required for the freshwater planning
program, which is of course part of a greater, wider program. The coastal plan and the RPS parts of that will continue to be funded through rates.
Chair, third and final question, still that same page, item, excuse me, item 39. It mentions that some programs have been rescoped and deferred to smooth the plan. I wonder if you could just clarify what's happened there.
So through the deliberations, some of the changes that were made to programs to spread them out over years 2 and 3 has meant that those programs, some of the programs have required rescoping. So for example, the Me Ururako program, which now has the QE2 component to it, has been rescoped to accommodate that new approach that Council approved in the deliberation. So that's an example.
Thank you. Any other questions anybody's got about the content of the LTP? All right, so who would like to speak to this item? Peter, do you want to speak first?
Yeah, firstly, I'd just like to thank everyone for their patience on this, getting us to today. Julian's reiterated when he spoke about the process being complicated and involved, and the amount of effort that you guys put in. And I don't think we acknowledge that enough. So thanks very much for that. Thanks for the leadership from Tier 2s. And thank you for your patience and also for your prodding sometimes, Stephanie, on this. I think we've found it difficult. We've got a new council. We've got a lot of ideas in terms of change and where we want to go to. We're in an environment where a 25% rate increase, almost 25% rate has increased. It wasn't palatable to a lot of us. The fact that we've got it to where we are, the fact that some of us have had to actually back down in terms of debt funding some things, but you know, that we wouldn't normally do. I think the palatability of this rate increase is the thing that, in my mind anyway, is you know, is something that in terms of a front page item, although it's not nice at 12%, it's defendable. I could stand in the main street to Tamaka and defend this. And that's my test on this, I guess. My test on this is the fact that we do know the business intimately in terms of what it's going to take to move us forward. We do know how aspirational everyone is around this table. We do know that we've got an organisation that is really well suited and really well placed going forward. We do know the challenges of the legislation that's coming our way. And we've also then got another big bump in the road with the rivers. So, you know, there's a lot to do. I know some of us aren't happy about where we've got to, but in terms of my seconding this motion, I think it's the right thing to do at this point in time. And so I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Councillor John Funkel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I too thank all staff and the Directorate down for the immense amount of work that you have done in quite challenging times, changes of thought and thinking, and trying to almost work on your feet to pull budgets and thinking together. Really do appreciate that work. So what I'm going to say next, please don't take that as a personal criticism. It is more for a challenge at this table, because I really genuinely appreciate the challenges that you have been through to get us to where we are today. For me, we had I guess a year one budget which was very aspirational, and we pulled it back by some manner and then sat around and talked and bumped it up again. We thought it was too high, the public wouldn't like it, so we've done a wee bit of a shuffling of the deck chairs and we've pushed a bit out into following years. We thought it's still too high at 18.5% or somewhere, so we've borrowed some money. But we're still increasing our expenditure by 18.5%, whether it's by taxation or whatever means. And then we've found ourselves in a position where in year 2, we're sitting at 18.5% already, with no a real ability to work out what the costs of the recent events over the last few weeks will be to this organisation and the people of Canterbury. And so my frustration is that we had, having almost lost the debate about the prioritisation and the size, there was an attempt to try and shift some of the cost through the uniform annual charge. And so we end up with 90% of the general rate being rated against capital value and under 10% with the UAGC. A little bit of a shift there would have shifted some of the burden away from those business owners, farmers and whoever who pays a significant amount in comparison. So staff advised that we should do that. We as a council have chosen not to go there. I am frustrated. Staff advised that borrowing was not the best way forward. We chose again not to take that advice and looked to bring our overall rate down by borrowing to make it more palatable. So I am really challenged that we're sitting, yes, at a 12%, but effectively an 18.5% increase, an 18.5% increase in year 2, with a whole bunch of things to come that we're not sure of, given the floods and the likes. What does year 3 look like? We're heading towards a 40 or a 50% increase over 3 years in our rates. I do not believe that we are fulfilling our fiduciary duty. I do not believe that we are doing the people of Canterbury justice by increasing our rate to take and our expenditure by that much over time. A number of us tried to convince you of the implications of the actions of spreading, of pushing things forward, of borrowing and the costs. We haven't been listened to. So we are, unfortunately, in my mind, in the position we are today, and I cannot support this long-term plan due to the costs and the effects that it will have on our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Clearwater. Thank you very much. I haven't actually talked to Councillor Funkel this morning or for the last couple of days, but it's quite funny how the conversation is going to be similar. Through you, Madam Chair, I would also particularly take this time to thank all the staff that have been involved in getting the long-term plan to this point of adoption. It hasn't been an easy task, and that's for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to go into them. Personally, like you all, I'll be very relieved when this day is concluded. I'm well aware today that the council must adopt a long-term plan and provide funding and direction for our ongoing work. The consultation document received the biggest number of submissions in recent times at 1,295, and that's got to be telling us something, as people aren't generally moved to respond to something they agree with. And for many submitters, affordability was an issue in the draft long-term plan. A potential average rate rise in the mid-20s is sure to get attention, and it did. I also want to thank all the submitters who not only took the time and effort to provide their views, but those who then also gave their time and came and presented passionately to this council. I perceive the key issues to be who pays, affordability, and doability from a capacity and capability perspective, given the massive uplift across New Zealand in the same environmental spaces. The focus of who pays and who benefits has often been discussed around this table with respect to CME, for example. Why doesn't it apply when we look to future funding? The UAGC is a funding tool which allows everybody to equally contribute to public good work programs or benefits. Despite staff advice on benefit realisation of each program, this council in here, chose to ignore that advice and consult on a small increase of dollars rather than a logical decision-making process. However, the quantum of the total potential and now rate rise far outweighs any UAG shift impact, as the ratepayer is merely concerned about the total dollars they have to pay at the end of the day. Many submitters, including several councils who presented at this table, representing a significant number of ratepayers, gave us some direction, including on how and why they use the UAGC, and requested this council use the UAGC rating tool to a maximum capacity. We remain one of the regional councils with the lowest UAGC, and of other local bodies in Canterbury who use it. We didn't listen to the submitters' concerns or voice. Why submit? You won't take any notice was a constant retort I got during the consultation period, and we have just reinforced that. UAGC is a funding lever we have failed to utilise. And I hear often how this council prides itself on being future-looking and aspirational, but I fear the reality of funding and what can actually be achieved are not aligned. This is a 10-year plan, and it has become obvious for all to see, even with staff doing their very best to phase work programs, and this council choosing to borrow to reduce the current rate impost. Enormous rate increases are signalled in the near future. 18.8% already for year 2. I've sat at this table long enough to know that it won't be that size next year. That'll be added to before it's actually looked at. While the Treasury policy allows borrowing as a tool to be considered for natural capital ACCA policy development, staff advice on several occasions was not supportive. Borrowing for a piece of paper which may be null and void before the term of any borrowing up is, in my view, is not financially prudent decision. Hence, I couldn't support it in the deliberations, and I certainly don't support it now. Unless there is a critical review for the next annual plan and some reduction in funding is found, the can will continue to get kicked down the road. I fear this council is already like a hamster on the wheel. I don't believe we took the opportunity to reduce our expenditure or work programs to align with the affordability or doability concerns, and events of late have suggested we may not have considered the magnitude of some risks appropriately. I could have been convinced of the value in supporting a rate rise of 10 or 12% in year 1, had councillors been willing to critically evaluate the work programs and trim the 5 to 6% off, or spread the ambitious plan over the life of the long-term plan. I accept the majority have spoken. I will be voting against this rise. The headline, as Councillor Scott referred to before, may well be 12.6%, but it is not the true representation of the cost when 6.2 million, or roughly 5%, has been borrowed to fund year 1. Thank you.
Nobody's indicating. Okay, Grant Edge and then Lan. Councillor Grant Edge.
Thanks, Chair. If I may read, I'm really pleased and proud with this council, what this council's achieved with this long-term plan. We established our vision and purpose at the beginning of 2020. We identified transformational opportunities and enduring priorities. We stuck to our guns, and as a result, this long-term plan begins the journey to deliver on that vision. For me, it delivers on promises that I made to my community to advocate for action on our climate and ecological emergency, action to address the terrible loss of Indigenous biodiversity through inappropriate land management, action to further address water quality degradation of our rivers and lakes, action to stop pollution of our groundwater and drinking water. We're not there yet, and there is still resistance to change land use activity, not just to address degradation, but to recognise that climate change is real and it's happening faster than anyone anticipated. I recently watched a film based on a true story called Minamata. It's about a small village in Japan in the 1970s, devastated by a chemical plant that tipped mercury byproduct into a lake that people fished and ate from. The extent of deformities that resulted on children and adults was indescribable. It was caused by greed, by bureaucratic unwillingness to accept responsibility. The mercury stopped flowing, but the human suffering continues. Not on the same scale as human hurt, not on the same scale of human hurt as the health effects of nitrates in our groundwater, but does make you think about the probable death and deformity of groundwater ecology. A worry nevertheless. I'm not here to accept business as usual, and I want to make sure that I'm not party to poor and slow responses to deal with the pollution in our patch. And nor am I accepting of band-aid solutions that allow us to engineer natural processes. Delays in taking action is unacceptable to our communities. We didn't achieve this important progress on all those matters addressed in the LTP on our own. We had exceptional collaboration and guidance from staff, from a public that responded in large numbers, with submitters that endorsed our vision, but who didn't like the cost. Many expressed, and sometimes in tears, that we need to move faster. Change comes at a cost. However, not acting now will have far greater costs in the future. Staff reviewed costs. We deliberated for 10 hours. We phased some work and we listened to calls to borrow in order to smooth the rates burden. And as a result, we have nearly halved the proposed 24.5% and managed to still deliver all the levels of service proposed in the transformative option 1. And that's remarkable. And I thank the staff for doing that, and councillors. We must continue to be bold and brave in our decision making in order to deal with issues like changing climate, new technology, and challenges like earthquakes, pandemics, and floods. We now have to be creative and innovative in developing and actioning solutions, and perhaps we can even do more with our budgets because of that, for the health of our people and our environment. Our young people have an expectation that we will deliver. And I want to especially thank our chair, Jetty Huey, who is an outstanding leader for us. This long-term plan has enabled Jenny and our CEO, Stephanie Rixetter, to set about transitioning the regional council to a fully democratic and transparent decision-making body, one that allows for greater community engagement and transparency in its operations. Our new formal committees start on July the 1st, and we're all extremely excited about undertaking this new journey together as a team. And you know, our vision and purpose, taking action together to shape a thriving and resilient Canterbury, now and for future generations. So I'm supportive of this plan.
Thank you. Councillor Lan Farm.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. And I just want to really reiterate the thanks to staff for all of this work and this. It's no small feat, and we've seen, the challenge that we have given you and consistently given you and building up to today. So thank you so much for that. I just want to reflect, what I'm most conscious of with today and this LTP is absolutely the privilege of being around this table to make this decision today. And I really am totally conscious of the fact that we're here to make decisions for the good of the whole of Canterbury. And as we've heard today, the taonga, not only species but ecosystems that we have in this really special part of the world. I really want to thank all the submitters who came to this process, who let their voices be heard, who asked us to do more, less, faster, slower. It was a real mix of people, farmers, both intergenerational up to rich lister farmers concerned about affordability. We had wholehearted support from the business community through the Chamber of Commerce. We had young and old, and it was, a real journey. And those are the voices who ultimately have guided in where we've got to today. Like Councillor Edge, the number one thing that I'm conscious of is this climate and ecological emergency, which our chair has touched on, and that it really is about us making decisions for today, which will give the future some opportunities, the opportunities that we have today. So there are substantial changes being proposed, and I just want to touch on one example because I think it is significant among a bunch of other things. But in our last LTP in 2018, we celebrated what we saw as a step change in the biodiversity biosecurity area. And the expenditure around that was a total of 8.5 million in 2018. And now, just 3 years later, thanks in large part to the green COVID recovery funding from the government, but also the wide support of submitters from across the region, in our long-term plan consultation, our biodiversity expenditure in year 1 is now 37 million. Now, that is a substantial change that will have direct benefits to our region across all the wellbeings. So I'm really proud of that kind of move, which this LTP has in it. I definitely see these activities not as aspirational. They're not nice to have. They're not gold plated. They're nothing like that. They are the bare minimum of what we need to do to respond to our climate and ecological emergency. And I'm proud that we're there today. Is what we've got in front of us, the answer to addressing this emergency? No, it's not. It's the start of something. But I'm happy that the activities that we're putting in place can have an impact from year 1, and can contribute in whatever small way to the massive environmental challenges we have. I am quite interested to hear, particularly Councillor Funkel across the table, purporting to trying to convince us. We tried to convince you. I'm not sure who the we and you is, but I'm just particularly curious because Councillor Funkel seconded the move to borrow 6 million, and yeah, I'm just interested in that, and I wanted to raise that because I'm scratching my head. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Farm. Who would like to go next? Councillor Ian Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't take my glasses off because I can't see otherwise. I would like to congratulate our Chief Executive and her team for putting together this LTP. It's been a long, fraught and difficult process for them, as we as councillors have bounced around and changed our minds. I, like Councillor Mackay and 1 or 2 other speakers, have got some serious concerns about the outcome of this LTP process. And I think one of the most disappointing things, as Councillor Mackay has already said, is that we're not reflecting the opinions of the submitters. And if I can use the discussion around the use of the UAGC as an example, the submitters made it very clear that most rural submitters said they didn't want, they thought we were spending too much money and were worried about affordability. And a lot of urban submitters actually said that they thought it was affordable. And yet we had the lever to pull, which is the use of the Uniform Annual General Charge, to actually reflect those opinions of the submitters, and we've chosen not to. And I think that is particularly disappointing because there was a clear division in the opinion of the submitters. A lot of the other submitters were saying we're spending too much money, and despite the fact that the first year of the LTP, the rate rise, the nominal rate rise is 12.5% instead of the 25% as mooted. The fact is we're still spending the money. So we actually haven't cut our cloth at all. We have just used various other levers such as borrowing and a delayed implementation of some of the programs to try to smooth the affordability. I'm concerned about that because at some stage you still got to pay the money. Our ratepayers will still have to pay the money. I'm also concerned that we haven't placed enough scrutiny on some of the priorities in the LTP, given the large amount of extra money we're proposing to spend. And I think there is still too much frivolous expenditure within the LTP, and that was reflected in a lot of the submissions. On the areas where we are spending money, I have a couple of concerns, I have to say. And as Councillor Farm has suggested, there was genuine support in the LTP process for the biodiversity expenditure. I'm personally concerned, and because I'm a sort of practical sort of practitioner, and a lot of the people I associate with actually involved in doing stuff, that we have the emphasis wrong. And this isn't just this council, but I think New Zealand's emphasis, we have it wrong. There's too much emphasis on planting and habitat creation and not enough emphasis on predator control. And my view is that actually, if we want to save taonga species, we need to be more focused on predator control and less worried about habitat. And I guess that was focused to me when I spent 2 weekends ago in the Wairarapa at the Mount, and we went to the Mount Bruce Preservatory, where the only bird songs were coming from the cages and the rest of the bush was quiet. And that's purely because they've been invaded by predators and it's wiped out the bird species. And yet you go to Washpen Falls, a privately owned walking track up behind Windwhistle, where the owner of the land has put a huge amount of emphasis on predator control, and you literally have to push the bellbirds aside to walk up the track. We need to get our priority right if we're going to genuinely address all the crises that Councillor Edge referred to. And I think my other area of concern, and it goes to our emphasis on climate change, that we are spending too much money on talk fests around climate change and not enough money in those areas of climate change adaptation where we actually have A, the jurisdiction, and B, the core business to do so. And that's clearly on flood control. And I was reading a paper yesterday that reflects that Canterbury has half, so of the total billions of dollars of assets protected by flood control systems in New Zealand, Canterbury has about half of that for the whole of New Zealand. The floods of 2 weeks ago and the flood in the Rangitata 18 months ago clearly reflect the challenge that we face under climate change, that we have to adapt the infrastructure we've already invested in by investing in these areas, we can have the greatest benefit to our community. And it was also, I think, pointed out to us that floods and river management, out of control rivers, are the biggest risk to not only human safety in New Zealand, but also our well-being across all the measures of that. And so we have the opportunity as a regional council to actually put money into better river control and river management. But actually this LTP, although it is diverting quite a lot of extra COVID money into that, is still probably underfunding our rivers by a factor of about 50%. And I'm aware that we are going to be talking to higher authorities than ours about this anomaly, but I think when it comes to priorities of things we can actually achieve on behalf of our community, we should be reflecting that in our LTPs and annual plans. And I don't think we are putting those things on high enough priority. So I'm disappointed that at the level of expenditure. I'm disappointed at the balance of where we're collecting these rates, because I don't think that reflects the submissions to the long-term plan. And I'm disappointed at some of our priorities.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Who would like to speak next? Councillor Craig Pauling.
Kia ora, tātou. Tuatahi, kanui te mihi ki te hāpori. Ai nā mano o te whenua, ka wero, o I wero mai, ki a mātou, tōna wawata, tōna whakaro, I pāna tēnei mahere o te pai tawhiti. Tēnā koutou. So I just want to start by acknowledging the community, actually. And I note the acknowledgements that have been given to our staff, and I support that. But I think I'm really, going through this process, it's been about the community coming out in the numbers they have to give their submissions and to give us guidance. on the proposal that we put out to them. And we sat in the room for a number of days and listened to the ones that wanted to be heard, almost 300 of them. And I think, for me, that was the most important part of this process. And, what we heard and what the numbers say is that we had support for option one. That was clear. And that was good. It was nice to hear that. But there was concerns around affordability. And that was obvious too. And so when we look at that and we look at where we've landed, I'm proud of where we've got to. I support where we've got to. We listened to the people and they said, yes, we like your aspirations. We like where you're going. That's why a bunch of you might have got voted in. And so, I think I'm really, like I said, I'm really proud of the program we put out and that we've been able to hold on to some of that. But we did debate and we did make changes. Our staff went away and did the work they could to get us into a position where we could do something about that affordability question. And so, I think it's really important to acknowledge the community and the feedback we've gained and the process we've undertaken to get that. But it's not lost on me that, we are in a time of unprecedented challenges. Not just like Councillor Edge and Councillor Farm have said around ecological and climate emergency, but also in terms of the reforms that are being undertaken around most of the things that we are here to manage and to do something about. So that's not lost on me either. And so, and all of that's pointing towards the fact we have to do better. And I wanted to pick up the point around, some of the things in our long-term plan that I'm probably most proud of, and the work around biodiversity, like Councillor Farm has said, is to be acknowledged. And I acknowledge what Councillor Mackenzie has said around pest control and versus habitat restoration. But I want to remind everybody that we only have 0.5% of native vegetation cover left on the Canterbury Plains, and that the national target is like 20%. So, we're well under where we would need to be to have a sort of functioning, thriving habitat for our native flora and fauna. So, you can't just separate it and say one's more important than the other. Actually, it's all important. And if you look at the program that we've come up with around biodiversity and, the new program in Minamata, that's exactly what it's trying to do. It's not just about planting, although the terminology around it might seem like that. But if you actually understand what Minamata means, it's that we should be like a grove of trees. We should stand together like a grove of trees. And we should allow that for our biodiversity in Canterbury because they don't currently have that. And so I'm really proud of that. And in particular, the decision we made around supporting QE2, because of course we know they're not just about planting, they're about protection. And that's, that just emphasises that point. I'm also really proud of the work that we sort of collaborated on around the Green Philanthropic Fund, because I really am interested to see if we can test that space of people contributing more to our biodiversity. So I'm really glad we've put some effort in there and responded to that. So yeah, I just really wanted to acknowledge the community, of course, acknowledge our staff and the work that's been done, and the collaboration in the room that I felt during our 11 hours of collaboration on this plan, but also throughout the whole of the last year, working through this. Like Grant said, from our strategic direction that we all worked on together and collaboratively, that led us to where we've got to today. So I really, in the spirit of that, in the spirit of the collaboration that we've undertaken, and like when we closed the last the deliberation meeting about being on the waka together, and that's the only way forward, not only for our community but for our valued flora and fauna for our waterways, and to confront the issues that are facing us with climate change. So, I just really support what we're doing, and look forward to the rest of the meeting. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Pauling. Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to firstly acknowledge the floods that we've had occur really recently, and our deliberations were before the floods, and of course when we settled on our rates, and that's gone through its process, and here we are today. And I appreciate that it's a huge impact on those who have had a flood go through their property, their land and their home. And that's not something that we will ignore. That's something that staff have been working extremely hard on and will continue to do so. But I'd also note that these types of floods are something that we will see more of. We know from climate change predictions, this is precisely what we will see more of. We just prior to the floods were hearing about problems around drought, that we had drought. Banks Peninsula was as dry as it has been in a long time. We had a fire last year. We had another big flood just the year before. And these are the sorts of things that we'll see happening. And we realise, and we know that around this table, I don't think anybody's in denial about climate change. Our long-term plan is recognising the scale of what we have to step up to and start to address. And so for that reason, it's really not surprising that we do have some substantial additional costs if we really want to make a difference to our future and to avoid what we've seen play out just in the last month happening frequently. Totally acknowledge the need for large-scale infrastructure and for working out how do we manage our rivers best to withstand, be resilient to these things. But we also have put in, and I'm pleased to have really pushed and supported and encouraged the conversation to have with everybody, the constituents, whether they're big landowners or individual property homes in wherever you are in the city and the towns. We've got It's Time Canterbury that was funded through our last annual plan, created and going forward, having those conversations, enabling individuals to be able to really adapt, understand, play their part, know what's likely to happen locally. That's all absolutely critical. And I don't see that as a waste of money or frivolous, as has been suggested by Councillor Mackenzie. I would also like to say that we did hear submitters. We absolutely heard many, many submitters supporting option one. There were quite some number of those who supported option one who did say that there were funding difficulties for them, that it was, there was difficulty to afford the cost, but recognising the importance. Some said that they would absolutely find the money somehow. Many of the voices we heard who were supporting option one also were our youth, and we have a particular responsibility to our youth, to those who are coming after us. And so what we've done is to borrow in order to address this and smooth the rise. Anyone who's got a mortgage knows how important it is to spread costs, and that's what we're doing. It's an exceptional year. We're still in the shadow of the pandemic. There were people who did comment on how much the pandemic's and the economy has affected their income. And so we have addressed that. We came out with a 24.5% rate rise, and we've come back with around the 12.5%. And so we have been listening to our submitters, and we've tried to strike a balance between actually doing the things that we know we have to do. We have been putting off action on biodiversity and on climate change for years and years and years. And finally here we have a plan that is absolutely focused on achieving more for those things. Personally, I'm really excited to see additional funding for urban rivers. We know how poor quality our urban rivers are, and there's a real will and a desire to do more for them out in the community, and we've got funding here now to do some good work on those. We have under 19s now able to access a child fare on the bus. For me personally, that was a really important thing that I wanted to see happen. What this means is that 18-year-olds, if you turn 18 at high school, you can now access a child fare. You are not penalised for being born early in your final year at high school and having your family find another $11 a week to pay for you to get to school by the most climate change or at least a climate friendly option. So that's a particular high. And in virus schools, we absolutely owe it to our children to have the best possible education and knowledge and connection to their environment so that they can start to improve our environment and for them, for us, for our future. So to bring 50 odd schools that are currently on the waiting list into our fantastic Environment Schools programme is a real high for me. So I'm proud about what we've achieved. I'm proud of what we've put together, and we're doing something to make the most of our strategic direction.
Thank you, Councillor Vicky. Who would like to be next? Councillor Nicole Marshall.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Our long-term plan engagement process showed that where you have clear messaging, you get buy-in. We had a record number of submissions, and most of them talked about the proposed rates rise, My Way and MAR. And on those last two, we had really, really clear feedback that they were valued community assets and they had to stay. We've talked about the messaging around how people have interpreted the feedback around the 24.5, and I'll leave it at that. However, everything kind of beyond that, there was a bit of a muddle. There wasn't any clear messaging. What's different, what's new, what are we excited about? And so the feedback was kind of a bit of a muddle too. In the year that we've been engaged with the LTP, I have expressed ongoing concern about the way we present our information. Our formal documents, yes, they meet the requirements of Audit New Zealand, but they don't meet the needs of the community for them to understand what it is we do, how we do it, and how we fund it, and what it means to them for us to either do something or not do something. So how can our community feel confident in us and in our work if they don't know this information, especially against the backdrop of media commentary, no offence to the people in the room, that local government is ineffective and a waste of money? So during deliberations, we struggled to get the right information on the rating impact on the deviations from the changes proposed that were endorsed through the deliberations. And now we're in a position of endorsing a long-term plan that, yes, has a lower rating change overall than was initially consulted on, but there's a greater rating increase in year 2, which when we know there's going to be additional burden come later, as we've identified. Though there have been process deficiencies, these have not at all been helped by this council. Council did not have a clear goal or endpoint on this LTP except for this date. We've been juggling everything the entire way through, and I don't exclude myself from this criticism. And this hasn't been fair on staff, and it has fed a deficient process. But I also don't lay this fault entirely on council. It's part of what I term the commissioner hangover. There was not an effective transition from commissioners to elected members, meaning there is a lack of governance experience at this table, which feeds inefficient processes and leads to a lot of circular conversations. Had government created legislation enabling an effective transition from commissioners through to full democracy, we would maybe be in a different position than where we are today. It is my hope that a more stable council between this term and next will result in process that is fairer to all involved, with more focus on action than seeking to understand. Now on this, I really want to stress that my personal frustrations are not frustrations with our staff. Our team at ECAN have worked tirelessly through the many ups and downs of this process with massive days, and I know there have been definitely some sleepless nights on everyone's end. It has been a mammoth effort from Stephanie, ELT, staff in the room, online, those here in spirit, and also contractors and others involved through the process. And just my biggest thanks to everyone who has helped us through this. I just can't understate the value that everyone has added to this process. It's been mammoth, and I've really enjoyed learning my way through this with everyone. And so here we are today debating on endorsing this LTP. So from across Canterbury, we've heard how heartless we are for asking for this scale of rating increase in a time of strained finances under COVID. And why aren't we sticking to our self-limit of 5%? From Canterbury, we have also heard how heartless we are for not doing enough to mitigate environmental harm in the midst of a climate and ecological emergency. And why aren't we increasing rates further? So where am I among this? I feel our long-term plan splits the difference more favourably than has been done so in the past, and I thank everyone in this room and those who are here in spirit for getting us to where we are today. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
I'd like to say I welcome this long-term plan. Some might say that it's ambitious, but in light of the climate and ecological emergency, I see it simply as necessary.
The floods in Canterbury have brought the effects of climate change into stark focus, and we need to be prepared for more. When I stood for election, I campaigned on air, water and climate change, and I feel this long-term plan goes a long way to addressing these issues. There are areas where I would have liked more, and it's not perfect, but you can't always get what you want. We listened to hundreds of verbal submissions, and we read nearly 1,300 written submissions, the vast majority of which were in support of our proposed plan. We've responded to concerns from a large number of ratepayers around affordability by lowering our rates rise. We've increased the number of staff in compliance monitoring enforcement, and we've increased investment in dust and air monitoring in order to better protect the health of our Cantabrians. We've also supported the continuation of My Way, on-demand public transport that, unlike other public transport, continue to grow throughout the pandemic. Increasing numbers of Timuruvians are leaving their cars at home. This new way of doing public transport significantly increases quality of life for elderly and the disabled. While I am disappointed we're not going further with rail and light rail, I am satisfied that we are taking the first steps in this area. I'm really pleased to see that our investment in biodiversity and biosecurity has increased and that funding has been allocated to the QE2 Trust. In terms of affordability, we've had new legislation arriving from government, but without the funding that's required in order to actually implement it. So that means we've had to do more with less. It's difficult to set this budget, and there was a lot of debate around affordability. Many clawbacks were made in order to reduce the rate's impact. Some of my fellow councillors have pointed to raising the uniform annual general charge as a solution for making the rates burden fairer. In my view, we should not even have a uniform annual general charge. Just to be clear, the uniform annual general charge is a flat tax. It's like a poll tax. It does not take account of the capital value of a property. If we'd raised this more, it would have increased the burden on the low value properties, which would have had a disproportionate effect on new homeowners. Ultimately, we all have to pay for the effects of climate change. We can choose to pay some now, or we can leave it and make our children pay more in the future. I believe we owe it to our future generations to invest now, and I believe that is what our long-term plan does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Megan, are you? Yeah, Megan Hands.
Kia ora koutou katoa. First, like others, I want to acknowledge the staff for all the work that you put in. It's a hugely mammoth, as Nicole has described, piece of work. And I think for me, you know, it's true that this council doesn't always give clear direction, and that partially is because there are many new councillors around the table. But it also, for me, I think partially is about local government's a bit of a funny beast in that on one hand, there's a bit of pure politics that comes into the room that people make their decisions on and that people hold on to in order to be re-elected. And the other hand, we have good governance principles people are trying to sit by, and there's a mixture of people around this table. Some of us want to do both. We're a little bit political, but we also really care about the good governance of this organisation and of our region. Others are far more political. Others aren't political at all and just want the good governance piece. And others are just here representing the people that they know and they walk amongst. I think for me, what that flows into is the way in which I approach a process like this, for me, is about the good governance piece being the foundation and ensuring we get that mix of funding mixture right as we move forward, listening to our community, and then some of the overlay of our political aspirations and the aspirations that we have for our community or for our favourite projects or passions, as that brought us to this table as well. We had 1,300 submissions and over 6,500 points of submission, as staff have acknowledged today. That is absolutely huge, and I thank the community for that input. I wanted to respond slightly to something that Grant said about, you know, we've really got to address the environmental issues that we have, and we have major issues, and we're, we can't just do nothing. Nobody around our table wants to do nothing. I've never heard that from any of the members around this table, that we want to do nothing about our environmental issues. Nor have I ever heard that from a farmer who has stepped into this council chamber and spoken to us about the work they do on their farm. Those farmers speak with pride. They speak with pride of the work that we've already done. They want us to hold on to that. They want us to hold on to the work our staff have done too. I've never heard a community group come in and advocate not to do good work for the environment. The fundamental points that come down to a long-term plan become about who pays. And that was the theme for me that really come out in the submissions. Who pays? Is it doable? Is it affordable? How do we do this? What is fair? And that's the piece where I really struggle when the politics comes into play around the table, and we saw that. When we start considering the overall rates rise, and we saw that with the discussion on the UAGC. Staff provided us advice, benefit realisation advice. That benefit realisation advice was about, if we have an environmental problem, who pays? My belief is that we have environmental problems, some of which are legacy problems, some of which are current problems, but we all have a responsibility to address those problems, and we all have a responsibility to pay for those problems. The refusal to move upward to balance the burden between those who have higher capital values and those who do not, for me, especially when we receive very clear and specific staff advice about who benefits from and what the common good aspects of some of the projects that we do were, to me, was all about pure politics. And it was all about a refusal to shift and move. Some of us around the table were prepared, as Claire has referred to move a bit on what we heard with our submitters. Some of us went, you know what, we didn't expect so many people to walk into this room and say, yep, 24.5% rate rise. Actually, I'd be prepared to pay more. So some of us were quite comfortable with moving if we could ensure that the who pays balance was right. But others refused to shift an inch based on pure politics. I totally reject the idea that ability to pay is always correlated to capital value. I think of first home buyers who've struggled and scratched and scraped and tried so hard to get into their first home, and then to have a massive rates bill whacked on them because the value of their property is quite high as they've moved into a brand new house, because that's the easiest way to get on the ladder these days. I think of the pensioners in high value houses in my ward in Harewood or in Waimari or elsewhere. For me, that is the part that was most disappointing about this debate. Our revenue streams at this council are different to other councils around the country. We don't have a port or other revenues coming in, and I'd like us as a council to really address that strongly. And so that creates even more disappointment for me when we look at our UAGC and go, you know what, we've only got 9.7% of possible 30% of the mix coming in our revenue. For me, that part of the debate showed a real lack of respect for the submitters that said to us, yep, happy to pay more, but also to those submitters that said, please balance the burden, put a bit more on the UAGC. We did not listen, and that is very frustrating for me. We all took an oath to be councillors for all of Canterbury, and I feel that we have failed in that to do that. There are issues where, as a council, we're really united. Some priorities around public transport, priorities around biodiversity, but again, comes back to who pays. So I want to finish by saying I really disagree with Councillor Scott about what the headline should read. Because to me, what the headline should read is not that we've brought our rates rise down from the 24.5% we consulted on to 12.6%. What it should read is that this council is increasing expenditure by near 18%. We have borrowed in an attempt to dupe the public into thinking we are responsible financially. Make no mistake, we've also used that borrowing to pay for pieces of paper. It is operational expenditure. While we can write it as natural capital, it is operational expenditure. And I find it extremely ironic that we can defend it as a long-term asset on the basis when the $60 million piece of paper that we haven't even finished writing and confirmed through this council is already obsolete according to new government policy. The headline should also read that this council was so irresponsible that we decided not to rate to replenish our reserves. And oh boy, I hope that a lot of us wear the ego on our faces as we go out to those communities and look around those rating districts. We chose not to rate to replenish those reserves that we now desperately are going to need after the floods. The effect of all this is that while the headline rate that we see in the papers is 12.6% plus borrowing, we also have a more than doubling of the year 2 percentage to 18.8%. For me, I cannot reconcile that with those that put me here, nor with the submissions that we heard, because the submissions called for balance. They called for ensuring that we were responsible with our money. We have not cut our cloth. We have kicked the can, we have borrowed, and we've been a little bit tricky, and we've been irresponsible when it comes to reserves. I'd like the record to show that during the deliberations, I'm the only councillor elected out of Christchurch that voted against a rates rise of this magnitude, that voted against not replenishing our reserves, that voted against irresponsible borrowing for pieces of paper. And for these reasons, I cannot support this plan, and I'm really disappointed that in a table where I expect give and take for the benefit and the good of our region, we have not done that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, a number of you understandably have referred to the recent floods, and especially in South Canterbury, it's absolutely clear, they're clear signs of weather and climate change and changes that this council are going to be facing on an ongoing basis. And as Councillor Edge said, adopting this long-term plan, I think he wisely said, cannot be business as usual. And those words were also urged to us by eminent ecologist Colin Merck, where he said basically that business as usual was not sustainable for ECAN to continue with the status quo. I think it was absolutely good advice. There was certainly a greater number of submissions and asking for transformational change. I think we listened to all of the submissions carefully and all sides of the debate. And we know it was not about numbers of submissions. It's actually about the validity of the case to achieve a budget which is balanced and would pay for the necessary infrastructure, assets, and their maintenance and environmental regeneration. In terms of the aspect of the universal annual general charge, in fact, when I took my oath to come to this table, it was actually being true to my values and being honest about that. And so I just disagree with the idea that the increase in the universal annual general charge was something where it was intimated it was tricky. In fact, the amount we put in has more than doubled what it previously was after great debate. The other fact is, it's absolutely clear, and every councillor around this table knew and knows that the universal annual general charge is in fact a regressive flat rate or flat tax. And I actually am old enough to have thought that flat taxes went out in the days of Roger Douglas or Ruth Richardson even. And in many ways, a flat tax or rate is really like the opposite of what Robin Hood did. The universal annual general charge actually steals from the least well-off and gives to the most affluent. So I just find the comments in relation to that we should have really increased the universal annual general charge to 30% absolutely unacceptable. I think to achieve this, the balanced budget, I'm very pleased that actually that staff found a sensible way to recommend including some borrowing for national capital projects for these exceptional times. And there's no question that was based on a strong financial position that we're in terms of debt borrowing, to invest in those future programs, such as the freshwater regulation framework. And for the first year of the budget, we have achieved a reduction to 12%. And yes, everybody would like to see it the next following year smooth out more, and we can do that when we work on our annual plan. We know that. It's also clear, though, that some large farms are going to need to pay a significant rate increase. But actually, another part of the rates equation is the land property value that rates are based on. And it was interesting that in the submission from Federated Farmers, they couldn't tell us the average valuation of farm properties in their area. Now, we know some estimates have the average valuation of a farm in South Canterbury between 8 to 10 million. And so in future, we should bear that in mind. I'm very pleased that Council supported the Public Transport Service Review, so that the issue of some Christchurch suburbs, like including Summerfield and Beckenham and Waltham, not being close to a bus route, that issue is addressed. And I'd expect to, including to replace the former yellow electric bus in the CBD, if you remember that service. That way, public transport will be available and accessible for everyone. I want to thank councillors too for supporting our contribution it was 394,000 for the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. It shows that as a council, we can and do collaborate with other councils to have public transport and urban development aligned and well planned. And finally, I think it was fantastic that so many people came forward to make such a large number of submissions. And I was actually very impressed by the enthusiasm and hard work of you as councillors, and particularly our engagement team that actually led to that result. So overall, in my view, our long-term plan has been a strong collaborative effort, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. Councillor Tane Apanui, do you want to speak?
Madam Chair, Air France 447 was midway across the Atlantic when it entered a aerodynamic stall over 40,000 feet. On its way down, there was one pilot pulling back on the stick, and there was one pilot pushing forward. One of those pilots was correct, but they both ended up dead, and they took their community along with them. And the reason I use this one is when I looked at the numbers for UAGC, I didn't see any clear number that said push forward or push back on the stick. But we made a decision anyway, much like the aircraft did, and the aircraft's decision was, you're pulling back, you're pushing forward, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, which is stay in the stall. Now, I'm not saying we are taking our community into the ocean to face a very quick, horrible, flat death. But we do need to be careful when we're listening to each other. Inside that cockpit, the stall warning went off 76 times. It was not acknowledged once. So, are you the pilot pushing forward? Are you the pilot pulling back? Are you the stall warning? You can figure out who you are in this scenario. Look, inside the UAGC, we've got enviro schools. It's a common good. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. To look at a UAGC and say it's binary good or binary bad means it's just a tool to be used appropriately for the appropriate things gets you into trouble. There's a lot of rating tools that we can push and pull, and they're appropriate at appropriate times. And when we talk about that enviro schools section of the UAGC, one person during the deliberation said at $5 something, it was pivots, and that person voted against UAGC increases and votes against UAGC because it is a regressive tax. But you didn't vote against that. So when it's something that you want, it's good. When it's something you don't want, it's bad. When we deliberate with each other, we've got to look at things objectively. And objectively, UAGC isn't good or bad. It's appropriate at the appropriate times. So let's not be Air France 447 and let's listen to things and be a bit more objective. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Apanui. Ian Cranwell, would you like to speak?
Kia ora tātou, anei anō te mihi kia koutou, through you, Chair Jenny. Just like to reiterate the acknowledgement of the CEO and your staff, and Councillor Marshall said it, the ups and downs and the twists and turns of the whole process, and just acknowledging that what the information from the table and what you produced as the CEO and staff, we really like to acknowledge all of you for your work. Also, I'd like to, Councillor Edge always kind of brings us back to the strategic direction, and then also the enduring priorities and the operating principles, and I really like that to how we got to where we are with the long-term plan, and then just the values that are stated there, and that looking at those, I believe looking at its strategic direction, that is the reason where we are today. I really like the work on in the biodiversity space, and acknowledging our Tumu Taiao of Couch Lewis in her corridor this morning, talking about her manu, her taonga species, and the work that will happen. Look, kind of plays into the work that Yvette was talking about earlier. Also, the work in the braided rivers and pest control, and of course the leadership and relationship development. And in that relationship development, for us, is about the partnership, and we talk about partnership and our operating principles. For mana whenua, for a long time we were ignored, and then we were kind of consulted, and recently collaboration. But as Jamal mentioned on Tuesday, I think it was, he talked about that, and at the national direction, things are changing. Things are changing for the good, for mana whenua, and that is regarding partnership. At the moment, I suppose in the local government in New Zealand, it's a small P, but we'd like to progress that to a big P for partnership and working together. And in a sense, for this long-term plan, I can hear Councillor Hands talking about the work's there, the work's being done. The long-term plan was just about how it was going to be paid. In that sense, as mana whenua, we'll probably move to more of the Article 3, become a New Zealand citizen as a ratepayer. Some of our people are more at the lower socio-economic end of the spectrum, but for too long they've noticed the degradation of our environment, and that sometimes we're going to have to reach into our own pocket and assist as a hapore, as waitaha, to work together, to look at ways to actually improve that environment for us and also the biodiversity around us. So just on that note, I'd just like to acknowledge all the councillors for the work and the effort, and then as like in the staff, the ups and the downs, and the wins and the losses, but just to acknowledge that we are here for waitaha, and then hopefully we're not pulling on the sticks from one up, one down, that we can eventually work together to push forward. So on that, on our vision, our principles, just remember toitu te marae o tāne, toitu te marae tangaroa, toitu te ui. Haumi e hui e, tae ki e. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tumu Taiao, Ian Cranwell. I think everybody's spoken. Does anybody else want to speak? Don't want to miss anybody. So just as the person who moved the resolution, I'll just say a couple of words and then we'll put it to the vote. So for me, I think we all should be congratulating each other and all the staff. We've done a fantastic job as Canterbury Regional Council, and we're elected in a democratic organisation to do what we did, and I think we've done it really well. But like Tumu Taiao, Ian Cranwell said, we need to go back and congratulate ourselves that we took the mantle after we were elected. We developed this vision, and we did it in a creative way. We had a couple of days together. We got someone to help co-design it after I'd listened to everybody what we wanted. And then after the third day, the fourth day, we worked with staff. And this is what we got. And this is what hard work does and what elected members are supposed to do. It's a vision. Everybody's political view is taken into consideration, and we've come to an outstanding place. And what we've done is we've translated this into our budget, and that's our job. So I think everybody's done fantastic. And look, we are at a tipping point. Everywhere you see it, it's in you. You just got to walk outside in the environment at the weekends. You've just got to listen to the news. It is a tipping point. We do have to do things differently. We can't do business as usual. And I think everybody in this room loves our environment. Of course we do. We want to keep living here. And we have to do it for well-being of our citizens and all our animals and our environment and our flora and fauna and everything that's around us. Because if we don't do that, we're going to continue destroying the environment, which we've been doing ever since humans stepped on the planet, really. And it's a position that we've got today where we have to do what we can within what decision we make about where we are today, which is elected members to Environment Canterbury, the best we can for the future. And that's what I believe. I've been involved here. And I think it's fantastic. So I'm really, really, really excited that we're doing some essential things, but in this plan around ecology and looking at an ecological sustainability. Predator control. We've given quite a large sum of money towards the predator control in Banks Peninsula. Hopefully that will roll out in the future through Christchurch and through other communities. It's a fantastic way to go. We are doing fantastic work, as people have said, around ecology. The push to work with QE2 and work with them and do it the best way we can. It's just fantastic. Looking forward to doing a new vision around the coastal environment, working hard with staff and doing our very best to get the best outcomes. That's what we're supposed to be doing. The thing I'm most proud of, although I'm proud of the whole lot, is our nature-based approach. Our nature-based approach to educating kids and young people and everyone in the community through increasing our funding of our comms section and our community engagement. I'm looking forward to citizens panels and involving people in our decision making. That's what they're crying out for. That's renewal of democracy. That's what people need. So I think we've acknowledged the tipping point. We've talked about a way forward. It takes a long time. These bureaucracies are slow beasts. And soon we'll be moving on to the annual plan where we can rethink about it again in a different way. But we've acknowledged the tipping point. We're going forward. We've got a vision that we can be so, so proud of. And I'll guarantee most of you talk about this when you go for re-election, because this is what should be the headline. We have acknowledged the tipping point and we are doing a vision for the future, because everyone knows we can't go forward. Everyone's got a different view around it, but we've worked together. And you know, this is the way the machinery's set up. It's always going to be like this. It's always going to be difficult and barriers, and we've got to do argy-bargy and we've got to move forward and we've got to get here. So jolly good work, everybody. I think it's been fantastic, and I think everyone's led this. We're all leaders, including every staff member in the room. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I just think it's fantastic. And anybody with half an idea about what we need to do on this planet would be congratulating us right now. So let's congratulate ourselves and everybody in the room and move on with the business of council. Once I find the instructions, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, there's nobody against. So that's fantastic. Oh, there's one against. Are you? There's two people voting against. Three. So do you want your name recorded? John Funkel, Councillor Claire Mackay, and Councillor Megan Hands, and Councillor Ian McKenzie. 4 people are voting against. Have we got their names? Yes. I'll declare that carried. Don't forget, everybody, we're having a cup of tea about this afterwards. I think we all need one. Number 6, delegates authority to the council's chief executive to make alterations of a minor effect or to correct any minor areas in the long-term plan. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Now, look, I think it's lunchtime, isn't it? We'll do those rates. Yeah, we'll do that. And then we'll have lunch. Where's that rates thing, Louise? What page is that on? 126. 126. Okay, we're on page 126, everybody. This is very technical. At the start of this, we just would like to ask Catherine McKinnon to the table, please, Catherine, to just give us a little talk. Thank you very much.
Tēnā koutou. This report is about setting the rates, and the council has a range of rates that are required to be set for the 2021-22 year. The rating basis of each of the rate type is consistent with the revenue and financing policy adopted through the long-term plan. In finalising the rates resolution, we became aware of some minor inconsistencies in the air quality rates. The amount involved is estimated to be only $30,000 in total rates collected, which is about 3 cents per $100,000 of capital value. As soon as we found out about this earlier in the week, we consulted the auditors to discuss how we should best address this issue. He advised that he had discussions with the Officer of the Auditor General, and following those discussions, given the low values involved, advised that we should clarify the zones and complete the correcting calculations in the annual plan for 2022-23. So he was satisfied with the approach that we have taken. From that then, this paper has recommendations in 4 areas. The first one is in relation to the role that the territorial authorities play within collecting our rates. The second one is around the role that happens within penalties, postponements and other functions. The third part is in relation to the rating collection and district valuation data agreements. And the fourth one is to actually set the rates, the due dates, and to apply any penalties.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'd like to just note that we're going to put that in the commentary in our minutes that you gave us that advice. So thank you very much for doing that. Did anyone have a question for Catherine? Right, thanks very much. All right, what we're going to do here is, this is a rather lengthy document for a resolution. It goes from page 126 to 157, does it? And so that is all a resolution. That whole thing's a resolution. What is it? 153. 153. That is a whole resolution. So I'll move that from the chair. Is there anybody that would like to second it? Seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. Does anybody want to speak to any of this or ask any questions? All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? Megan Hands, Claire Mackay are voting against. Anybody else? Do you want your names recorded? Those 2 names are recorded, please. All those are in fact, oh, that's right, that's carried. Right, thank you very much, everybody. Now we're going to have a little break for lunch for half an hour, and then we'll come back to do the rest of the council agenda. So thank you very much. Thanks, Yaya. We'll make a start again now. So I declare this session back open. What we're going to do now, councillors, is we're going to turn to page 179 of your agenda. That's the Navigation Safety Bylaw Review Report. And to deal with that, I'd like to ask Catherine Harborough and Ian Fox to come to the table, please. Thank you very much. 179.
Item 8.6.
Okay, over to you, Catherine.
So as it is stated in the purpose, this is a legal process that we're undertaking today to start the review of our navigational safety bylaw. And the recommendations that you have in front of you are and have been reviewed by our legal team. So they are all have a purpose, and in particular, the order that they are in is very important. So was anything comments?
Right, any questions anybody's got? Craig.
Yep, kia ora. Thanks, Catherine and Ian. Yeah, I can see that what we've got to do, it's all laid out in front of us. I just had a question about, I'd noticed when I read through it that the new bylaws won't be done until 2023. So I'm just interested in what's going to happen between now and then in terms of sort of the work program and some intermediary steps, because I think it's a long time out, but there might be some things that come up in the meantime. So can you just give us an idea about it? The current bylaw remains exactly as it is until it's amended. The controls in the after part of the bylaw, the ones that are the maps, they can be changed at any time. And there's a couple of little tweaks that we're intending to do straight away. The body of the bylaw, as it's written, that's the part that's up for amendment and has to go through the formal amendment process.
Right, any further questions? All right, I think it's good to take note on page 181 of the perceived problem so that people understand and that what community input there's going to be, so people can follow this bylaw through, because I think it's an interesting process to follow a bylaw through and just see what lengths we have to go to actually to change a bylaw. So thanks very much. Any other things that people want to raise? Anything else that you want to tell us? Feel free to tell us whatever you like. No? All right, that's sufficient. Okay. So we've got a lengthy resolution here. I think we're planning to do that in one go. I always wonder, should I read it onto the record for anybody listening? I guess perhaps I should. So we're moving that the council determines under section 1551 of the LGA that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the problems related to the maritime safety in the region. Number 2, notes the staff recommendation that the overall form of the Canterbury Regional Council Navigation and Safety Bylaw 2016 is generally inappropriate, but that amendments should be made to improve the substance of the bylaw, and there's a clear indication of what those issues are. 3, determines under section 155(2)(a) of the LGA that the Regional Council Navigation Bylaw is not the most appropriate form of bylaw. Number 4, directs staff to provide to Council proposed amendments to the bylaw and the recommendations on the consultation process to be undertaken. So I guess at that stage we will also know more when that happens. And then number 5, determines under the appropriate section 155(2)(b) of the LGA that the bylaw does not give rise to any implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990. So I'll move that. Who would like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. Would anybody like to speak? Councillor Craig Pauling.
I just want to note for the record that in number 2, it's the bylaw is generally appropriate, but that amendment should be made. So just because I think I heard inappropriate, so yeah,
Number 3, that's right.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
So you did hear right, and that's if you need that point clarified, Toshi explained it to me the other day, because it is counterintuitive. That third, is it the third one? Yeah, no, the third one says inappropriate. If you read the third one, so Toshi,
anyway, it's the words on the paper, and I see the inappropriate word. So I hope I say the appropriate one next time. All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There not being anybody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much, Ian and Catherine, for your work on it, and thank you for coming in today, Ian. That's splendid. Rightio, we're going now back to the first one on our 7th committee reports, item 7. It's on page 61. It's the standing committee reports, and the first item is the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, and I'll ask Councillor Funkel to briefly speak to that. Thank you, Councillor Funkel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I first ask that those members of the Audit and Risk Committee approve these minutes? Could someone please move that? Thank you, Councillor Edge. A seconder. Councillor Southworth. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Nothing of racing through it. Too long a lunch. Just note on page 66 that there will be a review of our reserve policy. That notes that will be happening in time. Are there any further questions as to that report of that meeting?
All right, there doesn't seem to be any, so so you're moving the resolutions?
There's been the 2 meeting.
Yes. Yeah.
So there was the meeting held on the 17th of June.
Yeah.
And the meeting held on
29th of April and 29th of
Give me the page, please. I'm lost.
61. Page 61.
61.
Yeah.
And the next meeting date was?
No talking.
25th of May.
25th of May, and what page is that on? I was organised. Thank you.
Just let everybody just hang on a minute and we'll just get it organised.
A couple of things to take account of there, but I was not in attendance, but could I ask someone who was in attendance to confirm those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Edge. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. A couple of important points that came out of that meeting were the audit on the stimulus and shovel-ready COVID projects. We had asked for that piece of work to happen to give ourselves assurance, given the amount of money and the complexity of the jobs that were happening out there. I think from my perspective, what we saw was what I expected, that it was built a little bit on the run, that we were aware of deficiencies. Our auditors had found those, I guess, deficiencies, and we were working to put them in place. What I'd also note is yesterday, when we were talking with Basil Chamberlain, he congratulated this council on its reporting processes on that money, and that our reporting processes are shown as an exemplar to and for others. So whilst we are building it a little as we go, some confidence of what we are reporting and rebuilding in the processes. A second conversation, no, that one's in PX. So only those matters I wish to raise. Are there any other matters?
Just a couple of things to the councillors know about. On page 63 of an item there, workplace stress and mental health. So we just got some reassurance from staff that psychosocial harm came under the health and safety framework, and systems were in place to address those issues in terms of staff and protecting employees from work-related risk factors that could cause harm and stress and mental health. So that was something that was important.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Well, I'll just move all these together. Resolution 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 are going to be moved by Councillor John Funkel. Who would like to second those? Councillor Nicole Marshall. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Funkel. That was good. Regulation and Hearing Committee, page 82. Yvette, would you like to say anything?
The minutes of the 13th May, by the chair of the and our minutes for the 27th of May 2021 were signed and confirmed today. So there are no points. Given that I can't vote, can I ask Councillor McKay if she would please pass these minutes for me? Kia ora.
Happy to do that, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes. All right. So. For a second.
With Councillor McKay has moved both minutes. Yes.
We need a second.
Could I have a seconder, please? Sorry.
I'll call for a signature of that resolution. Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yvette. That's great. All right, so we're moving on next to page. This is 89. Yeah, 89. As I said earlier, all this is receiving the unconfirmed minutes of the Employment and Performance Committee of June the 3rd, and we're going to deal with this item in public excluded later on. So I'll move that, with seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. 7.2 is the Regional Transport Committee, page 92. Over to Councillor Peter Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, these procedural issues here in terms of these three recommendations. The first one is the meeting that heard the submissions that were put forward on the Regional Land Transport Plan, and that was on the 17th of May. So that's recommendation one. The second was, and these are both confirmed minutes, both 1 and 2. The second was the deliberation process around that. And the third recommendation is the unconfirmed minutes of the Regional Transport meeting on the 27th of May 2021. So
any questions about that? Councillor Clearwater.
Thanks, Peter. I just wondered with the submission from New Zealand Automobile Association, they'd done a survey. Just wondered, did they give you the survey or indicate how wide that survey was? I just wondered if they included that in the submission. This is on page 95, Peter. It was really, it's quite some quite strong comments, and I just wondered about the survey that they referred to.
Which paragraph is it?
So
Whereabouts is it, Phil?
this is under the heading submitted number 6 on page 95.
Yeah.
It's just in that second line of that shared survey.
Oh yeah, AA members.
That submission was from I think it was the Canterbury, Jesse, if I'm right here, from the Canterbury part of that. There's also, I think, a South Canterbury and possibly is there a North Canterbury one? So that was based around the Canterbury, based in Christchurch, survey. How we've dealt with that, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll push to you, Jess, in terms of a response on that.
So, kia ora koutou. Thank you, councillors. So just in terms of that submission, so my understanding that was speaking on behalf of the viewpoints of work that have been undertaken by the Automobile Association with their members. So it was sort of, I guess, somewhat anecdotal discussion as part of the hearings process when Roy Hughes from the NZ Automobile Association presented to the RTC. So I don't think off the top of my head that we have a copy of any information from that other than what's in their submission.
Survey. It sounds like the survey should be in inverted commas in terms of what they gather views or that answers my question. Thank you.
I thank you, Jesse. That's great. Peter, anything else? Anybody else got a question for Peter?
I just make comment also in terms of the deliberation process that we were using the normal ECAN deliberation process, that we were taking staff advice on this. There was an insistence around the table in terms of processes that we go through each of those. And I must comment that that was done really, really well by staff. Luke Carey picked up the cudgel there and went through them, and I think we got through them in an hour. Was there 80? 81 submissions. So, and I don't think there was an issue coming out of any of those 81. So that process was tested by mayors, and we got through it well. So fine. But I'd just like to move those recommendations, Chair.
Who's seconding that? Tane Apanui seconding it. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. We'll have to be prepared next time. Okay. It's just the way the TLAs do it, I think. Page 164. 109. Oh, 109. If I missed one out. Oh, I was hoping storage on page.
Page 109, thank you. Canterbury Civil Defence and Emergency Management Joint Committee. This is a report of the unconfirmed minutes. I will take it as read, but if it has not been read, item 6.1 COVID-19 response updates is worth a read. Equally 6.2 AF8 Alpine Fault Magnitude 8 program. We had a very good presentation from Science and others, and I think the Chief Executive is working to get us a similar presentation. Really, really helpful. The work that has been developed over the last couple of years, and so where we're sitting in the planning and understanding. There's also a NEMA Management Agency update, particularly around the conference, and I have talked about that conference, Hui Motu, how we further integrate Maori into civil defence and some of the planning that's going on. Challenges for me and us are we've been around how the South Island looks in comparison to the North Island, the rewriting of the Act, which is in place at the moment, along with strategy and planning and the like. So some stuff going on there. But I would like to take this opportunity to cover just two other points briefly, if I could. As we are all aware, our Group Controller, Neville Riley, resigned from his position, and it is a resignation, not a retirement, because retirement is something permanent, and he is moving on to other things. We had a farewell function for him last week, and just some of the points that came out. He was appointed, I think, in August 2011, just post the second earthquake, and joined what was still a mix of response and recovery. Civil Defence were working out of what they describe as not a broom cupboard, but a storeroom in Papanui with a very small staff. We can say they still have a small staff, but we are now in the Integrated Justice Precinct. So the transition over 10 years from a little storeroom in the back of Papanui to where we sit today, order of magnitude of ability, of skills, our relationship with police, fire, St John, just how we have an integrated system is in no part, small part down to Neville's work. And for myself, in a relationship with Neville over the 5 years, and that first working relationship as a governor was Haranui Kaikoura earthquakes. And we had a number of challenges that came out of them. One of them was the inland road, where we were required to put a cordon in place. It was the only sort of access route, but had a whole bunch of dangers associated with it. And we had real challenges working with Wellington and other agencies as to how we would put that in place. In 5 years, we have now got a very, very solid working relationship with MB Police and others, and just a really solid working relationship, and equally with Wellington. The second point there was, and the real tension arose due to the challenges of farming and farmers and stock. And so we blocked a road, we didn't have access, people could not get in and out to repair fences, stock water and the like. And whilst we understood the challenges of rural, we really didn't understand. And so sitting in the Justice Precinct as this last storm took place and just witnessing the process, we now have the Rural Advisory Group led by Winton Daly, which is an integral part of our process. It's a natural, so the process would go, welcome, thank you very much. We'd have a weather forecast, we would have our flood engineers, we work through the TAs and then the rural group. So it's an integral part of our civil defence response and worked in a relationship with MPI, our own staff, Nick Daniels, Rural Support Trusts and others. So just a phenomenal change in thinking. And the last piece I just really want to comment on that is, again, we had challenges with Takahanga Marae where we were a bit command and control and people went in and took and whatever and wherever appropriated resources. We are now in a position where we have an exceptional working relationship with Ngāi Tahu. And so again, Jamie Rufio sitting in the control room, part of that process, understanding, identifying what Ngāi Tahu were doing in the emergency management, coordinating that space, and along with TPK in the room or online. And so for me, those three changes over 5 years, Neville has been integral in putting those things into place, of making those changes, of improving how we operate as a system. So we pointed all those things out to Neville, who doesn't like speeches, so we all tried to make them as long as we possibly could. But we have seen a phenomenal shift in change, and Neville has led that, and equally led that thinking equally in Wellington in a broader picture. So that was that one, and then again, back to civil defence and the events of the last few weeks. I would like to sincerely congratulate and thank our flood controllers, our engineers, and all those staff that we have who have been involved with civil defence through that process, and in fact all those civil defence actors, contractors and volunteers that have been in play to sit in the control room up here at the Justice Precinct, to be in the control room at Selwyn District, to be in the control room talking to people in Ashburton. And they're all people that I was in Wellington with literally 3 weeks ago at our NEMA conference. So gone from talking about understanding, working through, to then sitting as a governor, witnessing all those things being put into place, the actions being played out, and the good work that was done. So I just I thank and congratulate all our staff and all those other staff who have been involved in this response. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Clearwater.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, John, for your comments, and especially in our appreciating the staff for huge work lately. But I just also wanted to join you really, and how we might acknowledge Neville Riley. Everything John said about Neville is true. I struck up, and you alluded really to the Christchurch earthquakes. He's been around since that time. And I think we are just so lucky to have been served by someone like Neville Riley. And I would expect, perhaps, Madam Chair, that we might be able to send Neville a little card ourselves. This is as a council, on a personal basis, since a number of us have known him, but for his sterling work.
Good idea, Councillor Clearwater. I will get him a card. We'll get him a card, John, and we'll get people to sign it. That's a really good idea. And I did go to, and Councillor Peter Scott, we both went with John to the farewell for Neville, because you're right, he turned up. I don't know if people know, but you know, it's hard to find people to do that role, especially when a big disaster's just happened. And we found him, and he came back from Sydney, and you know, it really helped, because it's when it's a big long-term one, who do you get in there?
He was only there for a few months, 10 years later.
Yeah, he was temporary. They were all temporary. And then I just like to note on page 112 that you went to a national conference, and I think it's fantastic. People should note how long the volunteers who got the awards have been actually serving our community for. Many of those whom I know have just been stalwarts of it. And, you know, that's something that we have to keep recognising, that we need to build up again in the community. We need more people coming through that are going to be the stalwarts of it, because, you know, we need people to keep it going while there's okay, and then we need them, don't we, John? So that's a really good report. Thank you very much. So you'll move the resolution that we receive the unconfirmed minutes. All right. Who would second it? Councillor Clearwater, you're going to second that. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, that's received. Thank you for that. Right, we're on to
Page 158.
158, and that's you again, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I think if you don't mind, we'll just take a wee bit of time on this, because it is a significant amount of money, $5.5 billion that we're spending across Canterbury. And just the significance of that, I think councillors may have some questions around that. Jess will come up. And I think before we do the recommendations, I think that, can I just highlight a few things, and then we can use Jess as a resource to answer some questions. So before we get going, I'd just like to say there's this extraordinary piece of work done by Claire in terms of manning the ramparts by herself for some of the period under Jesse's direction. And then we've got Luke came along and did a fantastic job. And we've always had Vivo there, who's does a really good job and keeps us all on track. But also Deborah, in terms of the comms that's coming out of this adoption for us. I've had a read of it, and it's really good. That's the highlights. The process that we've been through this, I think we started it early this year, yes, or late last year.
The process was started around about 2019, so about a couple of years that we've been working on this.
Just getting to me, and it is a significant piece of work. I guess the tensions around this have been quite apparent. We passed this 2 days before it started raining, and so would have we done something? And you know, if it had started raining, I don't know. Look, we've always got the ability to go back and make adjustments to this. And Jess, if you wouldn't mind running through that process, so just to give you a clarity around the fact that the damage that's being occurred, we can fix that up. This isn't a dead document. So.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Scott. I might just come to those comments if that's all right. I'll just introduce the paper as well. So, yeah, the purpose of the paper today is to adopt the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan 2021-31. This is a paper that's been, the plan has been approved by the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee on the 27th of May at their meeting. We just went through the minutes of those deliberations and the final meeting. As Councillor Scott has said, the RLTP sets out the regional direction for the $5.5 billion worth of investment in the Canterbury Land Transport Network over the next 10 years. The Regional Land Transport Plan has been developed in accordance with all of the relevant legislation. That's also reflected in terms of the recommendation 3 as to the agencies that have been involved in this process. And the committee, the Regional Transport Committee, does consider that this plan is feasible and affordable. The draft Regional Land Transport Plan went out for consultation between the 9th of February and 5th of March. As Councillor Scott mentioned before, we've had 81 submissions, and I think we had about 7 people come and present through those hearings and then subsequent deliberations. The feedback received was really strong, really supportive of the strategic direction of the plan and its headline targets. Those headline targets are a 40% reduction in deaths and serious injuries on our roads, 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and also 100% increase in rail freight over the next 10 years. I'll just draw your attention to paragraphs 14 through to 26 of the report. I'll take it as read, but that highlights the key legislative requirements that the Regional Transport Committee goes through in terms of approving the plan under the LTMA, the Land Transport Management Act, and its staff's consideration, and as was expressed to the committee when they approved the plan, that it does meet all those legislative requirements. Just coming back to Councillor Scott's comment about the processes post the events that we've had in the past couple of weeks. Certainly, there's been some challenges around the road transport network. In particular, everyone's aware of the Ashburton Bridge being a key issue. And certainly there's the opportunities, and we're working closely with the Transport Officers Group, and also in particular in that case with the Ashburton District Council and Waka Kotahi, to look at any avenues as to how we can speed up that process around the bridge and the second Ashburton Bridge project. So yeah, certainly there's opportunities through variations to the Regional Land Transport Plan, looking at other options as well with Waka Kotahi around funding. But all of these projects go through a detailed business case process, and that's how they have to go through all these different hurdles to actually land in the Regional Land Transport Plan. So there's been some challenges, and you would have heard in the media about Woodend Bypass and Ashburton Bridge and those commentaries, but certainly they are at different stages of the process, and having that detailed business case to understand the cost is actually what goes into the Regional Land Transport Plan, and then subsequently receives the funding from Waka Kotahi and ZTA. So yes, there are certainly opportunities to vary the Regional Land Transport Plan, and there will be variations put forward by the road controlling authorities as we move forward, as things shift, and as funding becomes more apparent from Waka Kotahi later this year. So this is a step in the process. The Regional Transport Committee has approved the Regional Land Transport Plan. It's more simply for this council to adopt that plan as part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. I just think that it's a pretty constrained area. The National Land Transport Fund, where the funding for this comes through, we're very aware of the commitment that, even though it's a big number, 5.5 billion, almost 75% of that, I think, Jess, is maybe even a bit more of that, is already committed going forward. So the flexibility within the National Land Transport Fund means that some of these things are really only possibly emergency dollars that we're doing, and so it's a political process wherein we know that later in the year, some of these things that we're looking at, legislation that we're looking at in terms of, the infrastructure report, carbon zero, those sorts of things can have an influence on that. My personal opinion is that as they play out, we may see things free up, we may, but I think there's a lot of pots on the stove at the moment in terms of where we head with this. I think there's a really quite a good result in terms of where we've got to. We've been trying to be quite collaborative. We're dominated pretty much by GCP in this space, but we have a consensus around the table and we're really lucky to have all the mayors there, which is great. But we have got a consensus around the table that we are taking a regional view, and I can put my hand on my heart and say that we include the views of those people in Waimate and Kaikoura, as well as those. We do acknowledge that the big spend is here, but they do get a say. So yeah. Any questions, Jenny, before we move the recommendation?
Questions? Councillor Clearwater.
Thanks, Jesse and Peter. Can I just ask, and I haven't got the actual plan in front of me, but just from recollection, did the plan also include the Brown Street project? Was that actually agreed to, or am I thinking of another place?
Getting nods from the back row. Yes, yeah, that's a project that's still underway, as you know, still in discussion around the options to be put forward on the table with the community. And we had the briefing presentation here. I think it was at the last council meeting or the one before, where the Addington Association came along and spoke about the challenges that they see with Brown Street, and certainly that's been discussed with Waka Kotahi as well.
Thank you for reminding that, Jesse. And just my recollection at the time of the briefing is that the amount of funding that was in there didn't really refer at all to, for example, upgrading the rail alongside Addington, so that road freight could come off Brown Street onto the rail. My understanding was, unfortunately, was that in fact that the funding there wouldn't be cutting the mustard and transferring the freight to rail. I just wanted to check that out, really.
I think our aspiration in terms of getting 100% more freight on rail is as I look at it now in terms of realistically a bit aspirational. Kiwi Rail's got a lot of pieces to move on their board before we can actually move forward on this, and you will see from the last budget the investment that's being put in to not only infrastructure but to rolling stock in the South Island. We and Councillor Apanui will have a crack. If you give him a crack at this, he'll tell you all this. But you know, a rolling stock is past the use by date, and so aspirationally, Phil, I mean, I think that's what we need to do. You know, the Littleton Port is constrained, and we're fully constrained by not double tracking and the size of the tunnel going to Littleton in terms of getting exports out. So there's a lot of investments got to happen in Canterbury. Some of the really good stuff that's happening is like the moving that hub in Ashburton, and they're talking about getting 20,000 trucks off the road from the Ashburton district by being able to put exports on rail from Ashburton through north and south. So yeah, Jess, but you carry on with that.
All good comments, and I think the only thing I'd add is that certainly through the LTP that you've just adopted, there's funding in the LTP for us to look at rail, investigate rail, and the integrating of urban land use and transport program with the regional transport committee programs and the targets that we're seeking to achieve there about the increase in rail. Kiwi Rail's front and centre of that discussion, and I had myself and the team had a discussion with their business development strategy manager last week, and their aspirations are to increase the amount of freight via rail. It's their core business, and so we're having those discussions as part of that broader network discussion around increasing freight on rail, getting trucks off the road. Relates to reducing our emissions, and it's part of the greater Christchurch spatial planning work alongside passenger movement of people via both whatever mode that may be through the mass rapid transit discussions.
Thank you, Jesse. And also just, I'm assuming that particularly because the Addington School group who made their submission, that there's been was an indication from NZTA Waka Kotahi that they would actually talk with them in advance of any plan going out. So I guess as soon as council, I guess, know of any more specifics around that plan, will be good for us as councillors to see that too.
Certainly, through you, Chair. I'll ensure that we bring an update back to council through the Transport and Urban Development Committee around the Graham Street project. Obviously, Environment Canterbury's got a key interest in that, but also with the Christchurch City Council and Waka Kotahi, and the engagement process that they'll be going through on the various options that they may put forward.
I think they made the most compelling case of anyone in terms of making a submission in terms of their community, cutting community in half, and the options that are available to do that. So that's a really big, deep, long problem in terms of trying to get through that. Can I just say one thing I'd like to say here is that as the chair of RTC, and then 2 days before the rain started, we adopted this plan and we're reasonably comfortable. But hand on heart with Kiwi Rail and with NZTA, I could say the most reliable freight source into the South Island is probably coastal shipping at this stage. You know, I know that Kiwi Rail was certainly not all that happy with their bridges in terms of what was happening. We've got I know we've got a piece of work in terms, because this cuts across climate change and rivers and all sorts of things, and we're very aware of that, and we will try and work hard with them to bring that stuff to a conclusion.
Thank you, Councillor Southworth, and then Elizabeth, and then Megan and Craig. Grant.
Thank you. So through the chair, if I could just ask about in the minutes that we have from previous in this agenda, there's comment on the emissions pathway in green paper from the transport emissions pathway, and it refers to achieving a 47% reduction by 2035 in emissions, whereas the long regional land transport plan is looking at 30% reduction by 2031, the end of the plan. In terms of, you just talked about the funding issue. So do you have confidence that with additional funding, that the steps that are going in place in this long-term plan, bearing in mind that there's then the opportunities to make changes as we go over the next 10 years, that they are setting us in the right direction to be able to actually achieve that 47%, which will become necessary? Are we doing all we can at this point?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, certainly that's the part of the feasibility and affordability discussion, and that's why these projects within the Regional Land Transport Plan, and this isn't just about road maintenance, it's not just about building bridges or road roundabouts, it's about our investment in the public transport network, it's an investment in mode shift and all of these different things that will contribute to reducing emissions, which again aligns with where Ministry of Transport's taking their reduction in emissions from transport paper. Certainly that paper's out for consultation at the moment, and this process has happened prior to that, so alignment, but certainly the 30% reduction by 2030 is setting us in the right direction. So the discussion that we'd had in setting that strategic direction at that time was that we were aligning with where central government was going, and certainly in the $5.5 billion worth of investment that Councillor Scott's mentioned is putting us in the right direction, I think, to achieve that. So yeah, certainly there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. Pardon the pun.
Can I say in response to that, Councillor Southworth, that if you look at the freight movement within Canterbury, almost 90% of it is within Canterbury. So, you know, a lot of primary production, like 600,000 tonne or something coming out of Canterbury, going somewhere, has to go on a truck because there's no rail. So we're a bit constrained in terms of what we can and can't do in terms of the infrastructure. So the movement to you know, for carbon reduction through transport, to get that, it needs a big cooperative deal with us. We think there's a bigger opportunity across the South Island in terms of the way we move freight, and therefore a bigger gain, and getting a part of that. Canterbury can get a part of that of the stuff coming in and coming from south is on rail, you know, in terms of being able to do that.
All right, we've got a few more questions here. The next person is Councillor Liz McKenzie.
Yeah, I've just got a question around reducing carbon dioxide reduction via speed optimization. I'm not sure. I just want to ask, was this discussed? So there have been some recent papers published around the effectiveness of having, say, an upper speed limit of 80 kilometres per hour instead of 100 in order to reduce carbon emissions. And it gives you a more instant impact. You know, moving to electric cars is much slower. And I was just wondering whether there's been any discussions with NZTA or any discussions at all around, yeah, using the speed limit as a carbon reducing mechanism.
Through you, Madam Chair. So Waka Kotahi NZTA is introducing a new speed management bylaw process for setting in regional land transport plans. So that's a process to come. It had landed on us right prior to this happening, being developed, and so that's something that we'll need to consider. I think taking Councillor Southworth's points around the emissions transport paper from Ministry of Transport, some of the research that you're talking about there as well. Certainly this is all part of the bigger picture, and you know, we're looking at all opportunities through the regional transport work program to align these different opportunities so that we get the best out of our networks, and achieve those targets. So certainly yeah, that's part of the discussions that we're having at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Megan Hands.
Yeah, just looking at some of the commentary around the NLTF and funding and the likes, and also at paragraph 20 within the report, refers to the NLTF contributing 60% of the plan. There is funding pressure. However, because we didn't seek a significant increase, it says that funding from the NLTF that this will improve the affordability of the plan for the region. Is it an indicator that we think that because we haven't been as ambitious as we might have been if there was more funding available, we'll get what we need to deliver this plan, or are we still at risk given funding constraints, or maybe that's too crystal ball? And also just wondering whether you can comment, Jessie, on this council obviously is very ambitious in the public transport space. We'd like to go further than what we've asked for, even in PT Futures or anything else. Given the constraints, is it likely, I'd just like your comment on the record, is it likely that this council may need to dig deeper into our own pockets in order to fund some of those aspirations?
It is a bit of, through you, Madam Chair, it is a bit of crystal ball gazing as to where we may land with Waka Kotahi's funding through the National Land Transport Fund. The advice that we're receiving is that we will have that sort of around August, September this year. That'll require us then to reevaluate what projects have been funded and what hasn't, and road controlling authorities, all the TAs across the country, including Waka Kotahi themselves, will need to reevaluate their programs of work as to what's available in the National Land Transport Fund, because we are competing across the country, and that's a recognised challenge for every road controlling authority. So we put forward our best plan for the future and how we across the different areas, safety, emissions, etc. And so it'll just take us we'll have to go back and have a look at our plan and how we fund it. So if there are projects that Waka Kotahi turns around and says, look, we don't have the sufficient budget to fund that, we will, through the annual plan process, have those discussions with you and look at how we fund those projects going forward. Are they still a priority, or do we need to attract more funding from our ratepayers, or is that something, or are there other options in terms of funding from central government as well?
Look, I'm confident, Madam Chair, where we are at the moment with this RLTP, that we've done the best that we can with what we have, and the fact that I'm taking your comments on board, Councillor Hands. I think what's going to happen here, if you look at just what's emerging in the last 10 days to a fortnight, in our conversation with Minister Shaw when he came, there's a lot of balls in the air here. I mean, I think the national direction on some of this stuff, probably the appropriateness of the current GPS and maybe realigning that will give us a sense of where we're going when we go forward. And, you know, we've had Jessie and Tane and I've had this conversation quite a bit about, you know, all the stuff going on, what's going to happen. And I think that we're as good as what we can be here, but we need to be responsive. And I know this team is responsive. So we just need to make sure that when the stuff changes, that we change with it.
Thank you. Councillor Grant-Edge.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think most of my thoughts about or comments on funding sort of been addressed, really. There's obviously problems with it. It's really good too to see that there was support for reducing private heavy vehicles on that item 5, and improving public and active transport as well. And that's looks like it's on the future agendas as well. It's just a question I have regarding an item in the minutes of the 27th of May, where there was some support to host a South Island Transport Summit. Are you able to enlighten us where that's at?
Well, we're having ongoing discussions with that in terms of the South Island chairs, but we're also having further discussions with both Jenny and Stephanie in terms of the appropriateness of a South Island hui, if you like, given all the things that are going on in terms of across this organisation with Southland, Otago and the West Coast. So just how that, and we're thinking spring, you know, September maybe, or maybe a bit later. Don't want to push it out too far. I think we've got a lot to add and to share with the South Island in terms of where we see this vision, because these guys have got a pretty good vision of where we're going. That opportunity, Grant, we'll take it when we can. I'm not too sure. That's really in Stephanie's hands, I guess, and Jenny's hands.
It has become really clear, hasn't it, Peter, from our regional work, that we do need to be talking as the whole of the South Island really in these spheres. It's really, really important.
You know, ex-CEO of Taranaki Regional Council, Basil Chamberlain, was here yesterday talking about a national strategy on river resilience. You know, that we are we always say, look, we're special, and we are special. And he said, oh, you are special because you're probably the best rugby team. That's why he thought we were special. But I think the significance of our rivers are special in terms of the gravel in them, in terms of the way they change and move. And so, although we don't want to be seen as whining about this. We see, you know, and someone said this morning, of the $200 billion worth of investment protected, Canterbury's 108 million of that in New Zealand, and it is the single biggest risk in the country. So that South Island conversation is really important to us, really important.
Now, Craig, Grant, were you finished? Yeah. So are you indicating, Craig? You got a question? You go next, and then Phil.
Kia ora, thanks, Jessie. Yeah, I just note in Appendix 5, page 74, that there was advice to Paerenga during the process. That's great. It's good to know that the Papatū Runanga were involved in the process, and obviously that Runanga is listed as well in that appendix. So I just had a question about, I know the recommendation 3 about who we have to send copies to. I'm assuming that's like a statutory thing. It's just making sure there's some feedback mechanism to Papatū Runanga, and that might be through Te Paerenga. It might be a good idea to go back to them to do that. So yeah, just if you could just clarify what happened there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, yeah, we've noted it at page 74, the engagement that happened through the process there with Papatū Runanga. So the list of all the organisations on pages 74 and 75 of the RLTP, all of those organisations, including Papatū Runanga, will be sent a copy of the final adopted RLTP. And yes, certainly we can take that back through to Paerenga to, I guess, give a summary of where we've got to and where we're headed as well. So,
Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be brief. I agree with Peter where he's referring to the investment that is actually going in to transport, and like some of the funding, for example, between our and Greater Christchurch is eye-watering. Like, for example, around public transport infrastructure, we're talking about 60 million just in the city, and another 5.6 million in Waimakariri, and over 7 million in Selwyn that they're putting in to public transport. And then when you include what's in for walking and cycling, there's some very large investment going, and it is timely. So I think while these long-term plans and budgets are damn hard, in fact, we are going to be looking out for the results.
Right, well, that sounds great. Was there anyone else down here? Okay, all right, so thank you very much, Jessie. I think we'll put these resolutions then, so I'll take it that you are moving them, Peter, seconded by Tane. We already did that, I think. If you just note what they're saying, everybody, that the first one is you're approving, noting it, that it's been recommendations, and then adopting, so we're adopting this plan. And then that's who we're going to send it to. And we note that the final plan has been tabled today. That's it there, if anybody wants a copy of the final. Right, all those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much, that was good. Lots of good discussion. Yeah, 164, we're up to page 164. This is the submission on Aotearoa New Zealand Infrastructure Strategy Consultation. And have we got another resolution around this, or what are we? Have we got one ready or not? Yes, but are we going to just defer it, aren't we? Catherine, do you want to come up, please? We've lost our way a bit. I think we're agreeing to it and doing another process, aren't we?
Yes, delegating to you on that.
Yeah. Is that all we're doing? Just delegating it? But so we're not mentioning our process or anything?
I think the process can be something that you and the chief executive between you agree on. It doesn't need a resolution.
Okay, thank you. Just clearing that up. So I'll move this, that we agree that the Environment Canterbury submission, provided as an attachment 1, is submitted to the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission, and then we delegate to the CE and me to make any finalise any parts of the submission. And we're not resolving this, but noting our discussion this morning that there's going to be another chance for some input, and we'll get that organised with staff assistance. So I moved that, seconded by Councillor Clearwater. Do you have a question?
I understand that because some of us, and I was guilty, sent our comments in a bit late, that in fact they weren't included here, but I'm sure that could be part of the tweaking that the staff will provide.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's good. All right, thank you very much, everyone. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Did you have a question, Megan? You go.
Before we do that, I just had a question about when the submission is now due, because I believe the date's changed.
Through you, Chair, the extension has been from the 24th of June to the 1st of July.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then so I think I said we've resolved that. All those in favour, please say aye. And there's no one against. That's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. That's good. We'll get on with that straight away. Now we've done the navigation one. Now we're on to 185. Now what we're going to do with this one is, and I'll move from the chair, that we defer this report of the standing orders for further consideration and bring it back to council at a later date. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. All those in favour, please say aye. Is anybody against? That's carried. Thank you very much, everybody. So exciting. Everybody's going to work for standing orders. Now we're on to, well, I think they're really important. Now we're on to page 189. What did we say about this one? We're going to pass it. Okay, so everybody's had a chance to read this. I don't think we need anybody to talk to it again. We're considering and adopting the Canterbury Regional Council's expenses allowance and reimbursements policy and is submitting this to the Remuneration Authority for approval. But we're noting once again, are you going to move it, Peter? Yeah, you're moving it. Oh, I can move it. You can second it. How's that? We're noting that we're going to be doing some more work around this issue as well and revisiting it as we go along, and especially related to the remuneration work we're doing with the authority as well. All right, all those in favour? Or was there any questions? Claire?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Question of clarity.
Yeah.
So this paper that we've got isn't the paper that's going to be going to the Rem Authority for approval as suggested?
Yes. No, it will be.
As it is.
As it is.
Can I just get some clarity around page 195? Look, I might have missed this one.
No, that's all right. 195. Yeah.
Claim forms for each month are to be received within 5 working days following the end of the month.
Well, I know why that's in there.
Well, I know why it's said.
Yeah.
Then it said that if you don't put them in basically after 3 months, you have unless extraordinary services.
I know.
We're going to be holding everybody to account for the 5 working days.
Well, actually, I think it's really good that you've raised this point, and this is one of the reasons why we need to be discussing that because you know, I know what's happening, and people are getting really frustrated because people aren't handing it in. But it is quite difficult to do it within 5 days, given the work that you're doing. It's actually far too short, I think, given the work that councillors have to do. But after 3 months, it's problematic if people are claiming like 6 months ahead. They forgot one, they find it, and then they put it in. And it's just a process thing internally, so I can see why that's in there. But maybe the 5 days, we can just revisit that, because that is a very short time. So Liz, I did actually, we were going to have a working group around this, but we ran out of time. So we can have a working group on it for going ahead, and we can certainly revisit that 5 days. Because I just think actually what's going to happen is that what you just said, there's going to be arguments about it. So I don't know. Yeah. Claire?
Well, our CEO might be going to answer this, but I know that we'll have a determination in July shortly. What would be the time frame that you may envisage that something may come back onto the table where we could have that fuller discussion? I guess.
Well, be after that, but I think that is too short a time. So
through you, Chair, the purpose of this is to meet the auditor's requirements. And of course, we're running to the end of the month and starting the new financial year. So what we want to do is to be able to close it out appropriately, but recognizing that councillors have some other questions and indeed the determination, as you mentioned, would like to bundle the conversation together so that councillors can put the things on the table that need to be discussed. And then this would come back again in future.
But those ones have to be revisited, I think, because, you know, that's why elected members need to have an input into this, because our life and work experience is different to staff. Okay, and auditors. All right, so any other questions anybody would like to know? John?
Just page 196, accommodation in exceptional circumstances. Absolutely understand the 100 kilometre deal and why we would provide accommodation for people coming in. Huh? Yeah, I'm just asking the question. There are at times, or have been at times, I've been offered accommodation for late nights, early morning. I'm just wondering how that sits within this process. I've never taken the option or the opportunity. You live in that in between space. So just reading the $100 kilometre limit, does that preclude offering accommodation to councillors who may be here till reasonably late in an evening and a 7 or 8 o'clock start? I was just asking. I don't know.
That yes, it doesn't preclude them, because that is what happens in reality. 100 k's. You mean you have to go back to Demet overnight? That's how far it is.
So through you, Chair, I'm not sure if General Counsel, excuse me, councillors. Kapai? Well, I'd also just focus on the or in exceptional circumstances there. And I would.
What we'd be rolling.
Correct. So I would be looking towards the exceptional circumstances as you've outlined, Councillor Funkel.
That's what I think. All right, Elizabeth.
I've just got a question around the accommodation. It's for the $300 per week. I know this is different to what's happening in practice. Does this mean that for those of us who do have accommodation that we will now have to be paying more, personally paying more? I mean, will this take immediate effect?
Yes, but I think this just implements what has been happening for the sake of clarity.
No, that's actually a different amount. This is why I'm worried.
Excuse me, this is very, look, this is almost confidential.
It is. I'm really worried about this being voted on now.
So, I mean, can we move this? Yeah. All right. Well, I'd like to move from the chair that we move this discussion to.
Do you want to do the other things in the open and move this to do with the other things in public excluded? Because then we'll be going in and out of public excluded.
Yeah, we'll move it till we're going public excluded later on in the meeting when we go into public excluded at the same time as this pink piece of paper.
Yeah.
So we have a resolution of that. Peter, can you second it, please? All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. We're moving that. Continue that discussion in public excluded. Pardon? Are you voting against it? No, we're just going to do it later because it just need to do that stuff offline. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Apologies. Let's move on. Pardon?
Page 204?
Yeah, 204. This is Elizabeth and Vicky. Would you like to speak to this climate emergency update, please?
Catch up with their own. So this is the standing item that we have each council meeting to update on what we're doing from a climate change perspective, recognising how important this is and how it goes across all of our areas of work. In fact, we have 75% of programmes that we're working on have at least one item or one part of them that is a climate change action that has involved that does something to improve either our emissions or our adaptation and resilience. talking to the It's Time Canterbury campaign. This is something that was launched earlier in the month. And it's a really excellent example of a collaborative process where it's come through the mayoral forum. And so all of the other local authorities in our region are on board. Ngāi Tahu have been involved as well. We've brought in climate change experts and so on. And what was particularly exciting was to see Dr. Rod Carr speak to this at the launch, talking about how this is something that actually nationally we need to be doing to encourage behaviour change. We need to make sure people are well informed and understand what's coming at us. And that's something that we have a really excellent website. It's very simple to use. You can delve in deeper or you can look high level. It's really worth a check. Have a look at it. And it's something that we can build on. So this came out of funding in the annual plan. It then, a little seed of an idea, our staff took that away and have built this up. And we now have funding going forward through the long-term plan to keep this rolling, because it is a long-term process to get society, enable people across the region to actually change, to understand what it is that they can do personally. I think that's a lot of what this is about. It's aimed at the people who are aware of climate change, perhaps feeling anxious about it, but have not yet figured out really what do I do day to day? How do I play my part? So that's what this is all about. So I'll then pass across to Councillor.
Yeah, so I'm just picking up on the final advice from the Climate Change Commission was released on the 9th of June, and this contained the recommendations for the emissions budgets until 2035 and advice on policy direction for the government to ensure that New Zealand reaches its net zero carbon targets. ECAN submitted on the Climate Change Commission advice, and changes to the Commission's advice would reflect key points that we raised in our submission, include that the government reviews the current funding mechanisms and regulatory framework for public transport, and to ensure that local authorities have got sufficient resources to support a mode shift. Our support for stronger action within the waste sector, including all life cycle waste minimisation and circular economy principles. Support for localised community-led transition planning. Acceptance that a one-size-fits-all New Zealand approach would overlook key regional circumstances, risks and opportunities. The need for a well-supported local government sector, and also alignment between local and central government on a number of key policies. So new points in the advice from the Climate Change Commission, which will impact Environment Canterbury's work, includes updated recommendations to reflect the importance of wetlands, peat soils and other biodiversity, an increased emphasis on the role of the bioeconomy, adjusted assumptions around the emissions reductions via on-farm improvements and co-benefits optimisation with the essential fresh water package. There's a greater emphasis on transportation mode shift and a more ambitious but a fuel neutral approach to reducing emissions from heavy transport and freight. And finally, the other point was that we need to also consider the benefits of a low emissions urban form. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Scott, and Councillor Mackenzie, and then Councillor Hands.
So when do we get to the point when we're going to do something practical in terms of this stuff? You know, there's some stuff staring at us here in terms of landfills and coastal communities and stuff like that. And we seem to be, I don't know, I'm not accusing anyone. We seem to be skipping around that. Some of the stuff's in the mayoral forum. I believe it should be sitting squarely with us in terms of our advice across TAs. I don't know what others think.
That's something we can raise through the, I think we should raise that with, you make a comment, because we have been talking about that.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I didn't mean to be looking sideways at you. I just wanted, I think it's always important to remember where we started on this journey. Previous governments were not focused on climate change. This council was the first council in the country to declare a climate change emergency. The work that has been done is that we have an integrated climate change program across all of the portfolios, and climate change is taken into account. Having said that, there are a number of things that need to still step up in your LTP, which you endorsed and approved today. There is more work there. And Councillor Scott, I suspect you're also suggesting, in terms of one of the number one hazards for our region being flooding, and the investment in managing those floods before and after is a critical part that we will need to revisit. For this council, we've been focused on adaptation, and the question is, what are the future adaptation pieces that we need to do more of? I just suggest, though, that we've been on that journey and we have done quite a lot to date, but there's more to do.
Oh, we'll keep raising it. Yes, hold on. Councillor Ian Mackenzie, did you have your hand up? No or yes? You didn't. Oh, good. I'm not good, but I mean, you can put it up if you like. Megan, hands. Good, I wasn't wrong, I mean.
Just a question to Vicky and Liz, or perhaps Stephanie. Given the comments around Dr. Rodcar's excitement at the It's Time Canterbury campaign, and given we've had to allocate significant amount of money for comms around climate change within the LTP, have we approached, given their excitement and where the Climate Change Commission's going and government's going, have we approached them to consider funding some of that work rather than us? And if not, are we able to, please?
Well, as I understand it, other regions may take it up, and if they do, MB will be very interested in it. Taflin, would you like to say, in fact, would you like to come to the table? Because that's what's supposed to happen.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, just on the question of the campaign work. So we have packaged that up and taken it to the Regional Sector 6, a special interest group. If we can get that group across the line to use this in all the regions, then MFE have said that they will be supporting that with some central funding, and it would become a national campaign that would roll out through the regions. Yep.
Good. Who else? Councillor Clearwater, would you like to ask a question?
Mine's really just a more general question, and it's around, I guess, it's alongside the information you've told us about, Vicky and Elizabeth, is that you obviously the Rodcar Committee have published a report, or government have accepted and made decisions on that report. All right. Well, it went to government, but and I understood they've made a response. And I'm just wondering how we see that response.
You're quite correct, Councillor Clearwater. That's within the last week that government has done that. And I have every expectation that staff will come back to you with a formal briefing and at a subsequent update through Councillors Southworth and Mackenzie that you would be able to speak to that then.
Any other questions anybody's got? No? Cool. All right, so where are we doing? We'll move that's moved by Councillor Southworth and seconded by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie that the report be accepted. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. That's good to find all that out at each meeting. Now we're on page 207. This is around the council and committee meeting schedule. We had a bit of a talk about this before. Do you want to come up, Toshi, at all? Where are you? Are there any further questions from anybody about this report? Perhaps we don't need you because there's no questions. All right. I'll move this from the chair. Who would like to second it? Seconded by Councillor John Funkel. All those in favour, please say aye. And that's carried. I'd just like to note that we have got a 6-monthly review of this, and we can ask questions and raise things as we go along, working with staff to get to a good position around it. So thank you very much, everybody who's contributed. We are up to page 211. I'd like to invite Catherine to come back to the table. Who's supporting, who's coming up with this one? Is it you, Catherine? This Catherine? It's good to say Catherine. I'll definitely get somebody.
this contract's been in place for a number of years and is subject to ongoing reviews with the Department of Internal Affairs, who largely funds the work that we do for Chatham Islands Council. The review's not completed yet, and in order to be completely above board, we need to extend the contract for another year. Given the values involved, we're seeking this council's approval to do that.
Does anybody want to ask a question about it? Yes, Councillor.
Look, I've been here for now 5 years and I've offered every year to go to the Chathams to check out this and it hasn't happened yet, Chair.
We think there are some catchments we might need to go and check out over there.
Favour, please say aye. Thank you, Catherine. All anybody against? There's nobody against. That's carried. Thank you very much.
I make a comment that Chatham Islands would be closest to the constituency that Vicky and myself are responsible for, just saying.
Okay, I want to move to item number 9, exclusion of the public from the meeting. I'll move that we exclude the public from the meeting, seconded by Councillor John Funkel. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. I think ask all staff to leave, please, except for essential ones. I'm going to be asking everybody to leave for item 1.2, which we'll be taking at the end. Final parts of the meeting. Other business, there is none. Notices of motion, there are none. Questions, there are none. Next meeting, 8th of July.
Sorry, I'm not having a good day. We do need to confirm the acting decisions about the meeting. Was that correct?
Yes. We did. Do we need to move them out?
Yes, you actually need to, when you decide something in public excluded. Sorry if I'm bossing you around. That's what you're supposed to do. You make decisions in public excluded, but unless you to release them in open meeting, but unless you actually release them in an open meeting, they stay in public excluded.
Yeah, well, come on then. We'll release that part.
Okay.
I said we're not releasing the part that we.
No, that's right. We're just doing the acting positions.
Yeah.
No, can I remove it? Can I remove it a second?
Because it's unless it's on the topic. No.
So can we have a move?
Yes, moved by me and seconded by John Funkel.
Lovely, thank you.
All those in favour? Moving it out, aye. That's carried. Cool. Right, it's all finished except for the karakia. Who's going to say it? Okay, good.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, firstly, just acknowledging everyone. Another big meeting, big decisions, and yeah, just acknowledging everyone for their mahi. Thanks, Louise, for your ongoing support and help and getting us through things. Thanks, Jenny, for your leadership, and to you too, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And he karakia whakamutu ngō tātou nei hui. Unuhia, ki te uru tapu nui a tāne, ki a wātea, te mama, te nākau, te tina, te wairua, i te ara takata, ko i rā e roka, whakairiaki ki roka, ki a tina, haumie, huie,
Kia ora.